Out on the road, the mad wolf lifts its head and sniffs, and its eyes turn toward our courtyard. It leaps into the dark, leaving a street of corpses and burning houses behind it. My skin prickles as something fierce comes down the road at speed. I tell my father to get everyone into position and take my crossbow to the wall with an iron rod through my belt. A dark shape is already coming. I shoot first without bothering to think, and the bolt hits the mad wolf square and skids off its hide like a thrown stone. So I drop the crossbow, haul myself onto the top of the wall, and let the blood and vital energy surge through me. It jumps for the courtyard and I jump to meet it, catching it in midair with the full weight of the rod. It slams down, gets up and barks itself hoarse, and I invite it to come on up. It tries. I knock it down. It tries again from another angle, and I knock it down again, and the whole exchange turns into whack-a-mole with me as the mallet. It is already covered in wounds from the fireball, badly hurt and slowing, and it still will not leave. It does not want to eat me. It wants to get inside, and I cannot work out why. It backs off, drops low, and this time ignores the wall entirely. It goes through the door, breaking it inward and scattering the barricade, and 3 iron rods meet it on the other side. My father and my 2 uncles do not hit as hard as I do, but these 3 are considerably more than mortals. My father shakes out his hand and complains that the thing's skull is made of rock. The mad wolf lunges at him and takes 2 rods across the waist from the side. After that, it is on the ground learning what 4 hands do to 2, and we beat it to death in our own front yard. Nobody speaks for a moment. Then my second uncle asks why a beast that hurt would charge a walled house instead of running. Somebody suggests the 100 fragrance rice, and somebody else says nothing can smell rice from that far. Then my father asks what we do with the corpse. I tell them to skin it, keep the teeth and claws, set aside a little meat for us, and feed the rest to the blood spirit rice. The experimental field still holds medium-grade blood spirit rice at 58% growth, which I had estimated at 2 more years. With a monster beast to eat, it should take 1. We work the carcass apart in the dark, and when it is done, I send my father and second uncle Kang Guang into Owa village to pull out anyone who can still be pulled out. My old life put that reflex in me, and I have never bothered to remove it. And with the beast dead, there is nothing out there that can hurt them. I take the meat to the field and feed it in piece by piece. The health reading on the crop climbs with every handful, and the blood spirit rice takes it the way a starving man takes bread. It absorbs all of it within the hour and comes to full maturity in front of me. 20 pounds of meat is left over for the family, since monster beast flesh is nourishing, and the bones and teeth and claws and hide are packed away with care. Second Uncle Kang Guang and I bring in about 30 pounds of medium-grade blood spirit rice, and I store every grain for research. By the time we finish, the sky has gone pale, and none of us notice the night pass. Everyone in this courtyard is so full of blood essence now that a sleepless night is an inconvenience. My father comes back with a face like a funeral, so Owa village must be very bad. I do not feel guilty since this house killed the thing and saved everyone still breathing out there. 3 or 4 handcarts stand loaded with our belongings and the grain we kept, since the bulk of it went to Chongpeng village weeks ago. I tell my father the packing is done, and he nods, because we settled that at first light. Then the villagers arrive, and the first thing they see is the mad wolf's hide hung on a bamboo pole to dry. Some of them cheer that the cursed thing is dead, others fold up sobbing for a son, and most of them are wearing blood that is not their own. Within a minute the cheering turns. Someone demands to know why Kang Jian, being so powerful, did not protect them. Another asks whether he is worthy of the village that raised him, and a third screams that it is all his fault and to give her son back. Once one voice starts, the rest pour into it, because they have lost people and their grief needs somewhere to go. The safest target is the man they are certain would never hurt them, and my father actually looks ashamed. I will not have it. These people have no wounds on them, which means not one of them stood in front of that beast for a second. They were meek as sheep at the monster beast and have found their courage now, aimed squarely at the family that killed it. Nobody in this crowd wants to think about who made it possible for them to stand here shouting. I walk up to the man who started it. He is somewhere past reason, and when he sees me coming, he throws himself at me, howling for his life back. I step off the line, take him by the collar, and put him into the ground hard enough that he bounces once. The crowd stops as though a rope was cut. I pick the man up and slap him with everything I have, and several teeth leave his mouth and his cheeks swell shut. Then I ask him whether the Kang family ate his family's rice, and why, given how this village has behaved, we owe him protection. I hold each of them in turn with my eyes. From this moment they will remember that they owe the Kang family their lives, and the next man who opens his mouth about it can go into the ground with the wolf. Every head goes down, and they shake where they stand, and it finally arrives in them that this family is not something they get to complain about. I tell them to get out. They scramble, and then I tell them to wait, and the whole crowd stops as though somebody pressed a lever. I throw the ringleader at them and tell them to carry him home, and 2 men have him up and are running before I finish. Behind me, my father says quietly that it was well done, and then he sighs, and his face does something complicated. I think he has finally seen a few things clearly. We finish loading in silence and push the carts toward the village entrance, where a crowd is already waiting. The old village chief stands at the front with the wounded behind him, women holding children, men missing an arm or a leg. When he sees us coming, he goes down on his knees first, and the whole group goes down behind him, and even the maimed are helped onto theirs. He thanks the benefactors for saving their lives. As long as there are people, there will be 1,000 faces on the same crowd. And this one lifts my family's mood a little in spite of everything. My father and my uncles find faint smiles again, and so do my mother and the 4 little ones. We go forward to lift them, and they refuse, saying they will handle everything for their benefactors, and the old chief begins working up to a speech. I cut it off and tell him the Kang family will not be coming back. They only bow lower, and whether that is repentance or shame or regret, only they know. Carriages break the silence, rolling up to the village gate. Li Bui and his son climb down in rags, with their eyes red raw, and the kneeling villagers lift their heads to watch. Father and son come straight to my father, go down together and start kowtowing until both foreheads are bleeding. Li Bui has come to repent, they say. They thank the King family for saving their lives, tell us that everything the Li house still owns is loaded in those carriages, and beg us to accept it along with the carriages. My family has no idea what to do with this, and neither does the village, which has never seen that man make himself small. I understand it. Of everyone at this gate, only Li Bugui and I can see that the Kang family has stepped outside the reckoning of ordinary mortals. He can no longer afford to be our enemy, so he has made his position clear and paid for it in advance. The only question is whether I accept, and I see no reason to refuse a gift. So I tell my father and my uncles to move the luggage into the carriages, and the instant they turn to obey me, Owa village learns who the head of the Kang family actually is. It is the child prodigy they have been telling stories about since he was small. I watch the next thought crawl through them, one face at a time, that perhaps the one who truly killed the monster beast was that same child. Li Bui already knows. He drags his son down and prostrates himself at my feet, begging young Master Kang to forgive their disrespect. The loading finishes fast with that many hands. My father tells me it is time to go, and the look he gives the Li father and son is impossible to read. He spent years planning to make that man pay, and now the man is bleeding in front of him, and there is no satisfaction in it. He is still soft-hearted, and I say nothing, since the Li house is no longer a threat to anyone. The coachmen are all Li family servants, so nobody in our party has to drive. Then Li Bugui walks to the carriage door and kneels beside the step, and it takes the crowd a moment to understand that he means for us to climb up over his back. My family hesitates, since that is more nerve than any of us expected from him. I go first without a word, put my weight on him hard enough to draw a grunt out of the man, and tell everyone to get in. Li Bugui stays on his knees with his back printed with shoe marks. The carriages start to roll and he is left there, gray and hollowed out. As my carriage passes, I let my voice carry through the curtain, telling him that from today, the grievance between the Li family and the Kang family is finished. He lights up like a lamp and shouts his thanks to young Master Kang, loud enough that the whole village hears it. The villagers watch us out of sight without a sound, most of them surely turning over the thought that if only they had chosen differently, perhaps nobody would have died. Inside the carriage, I run the whole thing backward. The Li family that ruled this valley has scattered its fortune. Owa village has taken losses it will feel for a generation, and both ended the day begging us to be friends again. The damage cannot be undone, and the Kang family cannot come back. The old grievances have gone quiet only because everyone paid an unbearable price for them. You ignored us when it cost you nothing, and now you cannot reach us at all. And underneath that, watching those wrecked people kneel in the snow, I find a thread of pity in myself, which is annoying. Am I a saint now? No. This is the pity of the strong, and only the strong get to feel it. Which is precisely why I intend to keep getting stronger. Feeling sorry for them does not obligate me to help them. It only means they are not worth hating anymore. Let it go. There is a new life at the end of this road. Around me, everyone has loosened up and started talking and laughing again, and I am smiling at the sound when I pull the curtain aside. The sun is exactly right, lying flat and bright across clean snow, throwing back scattered sparks of light. Somi comes over and asks softly whether we are really going to her father's place now. She learned where he was last year, and afterward Uncle Heo Sang came to visit her at our house, and we all ate hot pot and had a good new year out of it. Before that he stayed away on purpose, because a bandit's name is not a thing a man wants attached to his daughter. Chongpeng village has changed enough that after the new year it is expected to be called the Chongpeng Gang. I put a hand on her head and tell her yes, that we all live there from now on. Then I apologize to her, since the 4 little ones have had a hard few days of it and I have let them do nothing but play in the courtyard. She shakes her head at that and says she was perfectly happy with Kanggi and Moonju for company, since she has never liked places full of strangers. Then she asks, shy about it, whether she can stay with me forever. I tell her, of course, if that is what she wants, because I have no reason to refuse the best behaved child in this family. She nods hard and hooks her arm through mine. I helped her when she had nothing, took her in, and taught her to fish through the worst season of her short life. The road gives us nothing to talk about, and we reach the Cheongpung gang by noon. Uncle Heo Sang comes out to meet us almost at a run, with his people behind him, and they start unloading without waiting to be told. They are all his trusted men, and every one of them has been eating the nourishing porridge and training since I set the routine. They are thick-shouldered now, and our baggage goes inside as though it weighed nothing. Somi sees her father and launches herself at him. She still remembers being carried over mountains and rivers to the Kang house, and her father kneeling in front of my mother to beg shelter for a daughter he could not keep. She tells me sometimes how lucky she is to have a father like that, and relatives like these. He gathers her up and murmurs something in her ear that is none of my business. I go to settle up with the coachmen and tell them they can drive home. They look at one another, and the oldest steps forward. The carriages and the drivers alike were given to young Master Kang by their Lord Li, he says, and he asks me to take them in. Every one of them has worked out that the Kang family is the rising house in this valley. He also hands me a box holding the deed to the pump shop, returned along with the pump itself, which saves me the trouble of reporting Li Bugui to the authorities. The new courtyard is laid out like the old one and is bigger and better in every way. Somebody proposes hot pot and the children detonate with joy. I take the chance to finally cultivate the evergreen art, since the past several days ate every hour I had, and I close the door and sit cross-legged on the bed. By evening the meal is ready and she comes to knock, and I am already coming out with a face that gives me away. The session went badly. My aptitude is dismal, and I sat there until my meridians stung before I made myself stop, and my chi refining progress still reads 0. It is possible the gain is too small to display, since I clearly felt a thread of spiritual power settle into the meridians. It is equally possible that the mortal world is too poor in spiritual energy to feed my cultivation. The one comfort is that the evergreen art itself moved from nothing to 1%. That difference tells me something important about this system. It converts repeated actions into skills, which is where learning and teaching and farming all came from. Once a skill exists, doing the thing fills the bar, and a full bar hands over a branch ability. My realm is not a skill and does not obey those rules, because a realm answers to talent and resources. Body refining is fine, since my body has real talent and the blood spirit rice pushes it hard. The energy road is the problem, and I only have a spiritual root because the system gave me one. Still, the system is here. I am waiting on the branch ability that minor achievement in the evergreen art will hand me, and I keep wondering whether that is the turning point. My mother asks what the long face is about, and I tell her it is nothing serious, only that cultivation is not going smoothly. Then I put it away and sit down at the table. The hot pot runs half the night, with everyone talking over everyone else about the life we are starting here, and my mood comes back up with the steam. This year I am 9, near enough, and there is a great deal of time in front of me. The new year arrives and passes in the middle of the unpacking, and I turn 9 without ceremony. Spring comes and I am the first one into the fields, and everyone follows me in with enormous enthusiasm, which is entirely a side effect of my hunger for farming experience. I try to breed the medium-grade blood spirit rice, and get refused because my farming is not yet of a high enough order. The skill sits at perfection with 80% of the bar filled. I also try eating a little of the medium grade, and the blood essence in it is far too concentrated for me. Father Kang and the others cannot touch it at all, so I seal it away and keep to the low grade. By July, I am standing in water up to my shins, wiping a sweat off my face, reading a panel that has just changed. Farming has left the old ladder entirely and reads first order, entry level, with mutation and harvest plus 10% and breeding still hanging under it. So perfection was never the ceiling, exactly as I suspected. According to everything my informants have collected, a first-order farming skill puts me level with a first-order spiritual plant master in the cultivation world. I have been gathering news about that world all year. I have met several rogue cultivators in Xiansu City, all in the early stage of chi refining, and I sold the Mad Wolf's materials through one of their contacts for 13 spirit stones. I have not spent a single stone, since I expect to need arrangements once I join a sect. Xiansu City sits inside the sphere of 3 cultivation sects: the Flame Sect, the Carefree Sect, and the Wondrous Sound Pavilion. The immortals who tested spiritual roots in Owa village years ago belonged to those 3. A few years back, a beast tide broke out along the sect's territory, and all 3 went to full war footing, which pulled their attention off the mortal dynasty. That is why the officials have been raising taxes without restraint, hoping to bleed the province and run before the sects recover. It is also why the spirit testing ceremony has not been held in years, since every immortal master was busy killing monster beasts. The rogue cultivators I met ran from that front, and from them I learned the thing I most needed to hear. The beast tide is nearly over. The ceremony should reopen soon, and I intend to be standing in front of that stele when it does. My target is the Carefree Sect, whose disciples mostly carry wood-attribute spiritual roots, and whose two great legacies are the wood law legacy and the alchemy legacy. Their reputation is righteous and their temperament peaceful. On every axis I care about, they fit. The panel reads well this summer. Kang ran at the top. Child prodigy currently equipped, with night owl, father of winter fishing, and little divine doctor waiting under it. Lifespan 9 of 94. Comprehension ability 110, 20 of it from the title. Spiritual root wood, 25. My realm reads body refining layer 3, with the bar just started, and chi refining layer 1 sits barely above 0 beneath it. The evergreen art has reached minor achievement, with a mana quality of profound listed beside it. Body refining layer 3 came the hard way, because the low-grade blood spirit rice stopped moving me and I began mixing medium grade into it. Chi refining layer 1 came from meat. 20-odd pounds of monster beast flesh carried enough spiritual energy to push me over the threshold of the cultivation world in half a year, which the mortal heir could never have done. After the meat ran out, so did the progress, and I stopped fighting it since I can continue on a spiritual vein once I have a sect. Reaching minor achievement in the evergreen art paid me well. My spiritual root value went up by 5, I received mana total +1, and the technique's mana quality appeared for the first time. Those rogue cultivators explained the grades to me over cheap wine, since techniques are sorted into heaven grade, earth grade, profound grade, and yellow grade. The higher the grade, the better the mana, meaning more combat power, faster cultivation and recovery, and greater capacity. None of it is absolute, since effort or a genuine treasure can raise mana quality past the technique, and pills that destabilize a realm drag it back down. The system gives me numbers no rogue cultivator could. When I open the mana quality line, it expands into 3 figures: cultivation speed plus 20%, recovery speed plus 20%, and mana total plus 50%. The speed figure only measures what the technique contributes, since the rest depends on root talent and on sitting somewhere thick with spiritual energy. Hold conditions equal, and a profound grade technique runs 20% ahead of a yellow grade 1. The capacity is the real prize. Profound grade alone would add only 20% to my mana pool, but the branch ability from the breakthrough hands me mana total +1, and that single point lifts the total of full grade. What should be a profound pool holds what an earth grade pool holds, so I carry half again as much mana as anyone practicing a yellow grade art. Wood techniques bring longevity and mana that heals as well, and between the technique and the body refining breakthrough, my ceiling reached 94. I had not expected Dr. Shin's grandfather to own a profound grade technique. Among rogue cultivators, that is outstanding, and in some foundation establishment family it could be the legacy an entire sect was founded on. The only pity is that this copy covers the chi refining section and nothing past it, so after foundation establishment I will need a new art. Both roads are built the same way, 10 layers each, 3 layers to a stage, early then middle then late, with the 10th standing alone as great perfection. My skill list is getting long: appraisal, learning, teaching, farming, pharmacy, forging, fishing, cooking. There are only so many hours in a day, and body refining eats 6 of mine, while the evergreen art takes 3 more at night. Eating and farming and the ordinary chores of a household fill every gap, and when a stray hour appears, I go fishing or cook something. Pharmacy and forging are shelved, because in the cultivation world, everything that is not cultivation is decoration. Farming is the exception and takes the largest share of all. It is my highest skill. It feeds body refining directly through the rice, and it makes the Chongpeng gang stronger every season. I have also confirmed that the Carefree sect keeps a mountain called Spiritual Plant Peak, devoted to training spiritual plant masters. Those masters sit at the bottom of the 100 arts of cultivation, and almost nobody with options wants the job. I want the job, since farming is the one profession in any world where hard work is answered honestly. A handkerchief appears in front of my face while I am thinking, and Somi tells me to wipe my sweat. She has come out to the patio in a blue and white dress, and at 8 she stands nearly 5 feet tall, fair and healthy where she was once thin and wary. Her father runs the gang now, so there is no coarse cloth left in her wardrobe, and dressed like that she looks like a small princess with mud on her hem. She asks why I do this work myself when her father can assign 100 men to it, and I tell her I simply like farming. Her shoes are off before I can object, sleeves pushed up, skirt gathered and knotted, bare feet already in the water. I tell her she will ruin the dress, and she informs me she owns several. It has been ages since she caught bugs, she adds, and her technique came from me personally, which she says while sticking her chest out like a decorated soldier. 2 more shapes come pelting along the ridge, led by Kang Gi, who wants to know why nobody called him, since he is my chief disciple. He is my age exactly and stands a head taller than me now. Behind him comes Munju, who has grown fair and quiet and unfairly graceful. We all eat the same blood spirit rice, and somehow some of us grow tall while others grow lovely, which makes me wonder whether the rice has cosmetic effects nobody has documented. I call the bug-catching squad to order and send it into the field, and Munju and Somi answer with a cheer that carries 3 patties over. The gang members working the rows stop and stare, because the young master and the young missus have just waded in to steal their work. Watching it, I feel my blood come up the way it did 3 years ago in a much poorer field. Some part of me is still a child who never finished growing up, and however many years pile on top of it, this is the picture I will keep. Snow comes down thick and the year turns over again. In the courtyard I practice in short, tight clothes, with my breath steaming, running the forms in order. The Cheongpung gang has been buying up mortal martial arts from every corner it can reach, and I've gone through all of them and admit they are useful. The moves open a province of technique I did not know existed, since my old sparring was crude and my training had gaps big enough to walk through. With my comprehension ability doing the heavy lifting, I ground the useful pieces into one set of body-strengthening forms, now taught to every member of the gang, and I named it the body-refining art. Plain, unadorned, and accurate. My first instinct had been to call it morning calisthenics, which is exactly what it is, but that name does not survive contact with this world. Somi arrives with an armful of red New Year banners and asks whether I am finished, since she wants to hang them together. The girls all drink the nourishing porridge, but none of them train since body refining does not interest them, and they are unanimous that muscles are ugly. They learn a few moves for the sake of it, and between porridge and moves they have all come out clear-skinned and bright-eyed, treating the regimen as a beauty tonic. That gives me an idea, since a rice that nourishes the body and replenishes the blood might genuinely be turned into a beauty product. I have nothing to show for the thought yet, and I will look into it properly the first free hour I get. We hang the banners together, and the whole gang is strung with lanterns and streamers, with a smile on every doorstep. In not quite 2 years, the Cheongpung gang has become a name across the Cheonsu City region, and people who cannot make a living elsewhere walk here. We take them in and find them work, provided they survive our investigation. A few outside houses have tried planting spies, and everyone was reported by his own neighbors inside a week and escorted to the holding cells. Our people have the sense to know who fed them. Without the Cheongpung gang, there is no roof, no work, and no rice. So scheming against it is the same as pushing them back into the dirt. We have quietly become known as the one organization not worth trying to infiltrate. I wander the lanes with my hands behind my back and hear myself sighing that another year has gone by. And just like that, I am 10 years old. Somi says she is 9 now too, and that life keeps getting better. And she says it while skipping, her fluffy skirt swinging with her. The child wants to grow up so badly that she complains about the speed of time. So I tell her that in a few more years she will be getting married, purely to watch what happens. She refuses instantly and completely, and the flatness of it catches my attention. When I ask why she does not want a family of her own, she says that marrying means she cannot stay with everyone. She does not want to leave me, and she hooks her arm through mine while she says it. I point out that she is far too old to be hanging off her brother in public. Inwardly, I am doing arithmetic I do not enjoy, because I have to consider whether this girl has feelings for her older brother. I have doted on her as a little sister since the day she arrived, and we share blood. She does not cooperate with careful handling. She says it does not matter at all, that we are siblings and family, and that since she is not marrying anyone, the question never arises. Then she wrinkles her small upturned nose, pouts, and looks up at me with an expression engineered in a laboratory. Do I want her married off, she asks, and reminds me that I once said we would always be together. That is a pit I dug myself, apparently. I said those words casually and often when we were both small, and agreed to them just as casually. Then again, the arrangement is not bad. She has been the most sensible child in this house since the day she walked into it, so whatever she wants she can have. I have more than enough capital in the mortal world to keep her comfortable for life. I tell her she may have it as she wishes, and flick her on the nose, and she declares that Brother Ran is the best. As for the future, when I go up into the cultivation world, Somi can come with me, because she has a spiritual root. I found that out myself, since once I had the evergreen art working I shared it rather than waiting on a ceremony that has been dead for years. My father and the other adults were tested when they were young and confirmed to have nothing. Kang Yi and Moon Ju had never been tested at all, so I ran the 3 children through the opening method myself, and only Somi got a reaction. That proves she carries a 5-element spiritual root, though her strongest attribute may well not be wood. It does not prove the other 2 are empty, since a rare variant root would not answer a wood attribute technique, but the odds are thin. I did not teach the art behind Dr. Shim's back either. It is his family's heirloom, so I asked, and he agreed without hesitating. I have not worked at the medical hall since last year, but the thread between us has never gone slack. I visit when I can, sometimes with the 4 little ones in tow. Madame Cheon has adored all 4 of them since the first visit, and keeps asking when they will come again. I plan to take them for New Year calls in a few days, with the gifts already boxed. The 2 of us wander the gang a while and get greeted at every corner, and the old farmers press their own vegetables on us until we go home with full arms. After dinner I go back to my room, and tonight cultivation waits. because tonight I am upgrading seeds. I reach for breeding and start with the high-yield rice, and nothing happens at all. Its line still reads yield plus 50%, exactly as it did after I upgraded it last year. So my guess was right, that each seed can only be bred once, and only the seed harvested from the following year's planting becomes eligible again. This year's high-yield rice has found the ceiling I always suspected, since the system tells me flatly that it has reached its upper limit. The 100 fragrance rice and the grain fasting rice already sit at first order, low grade, and there they will stay because neither can be planted without a spiritual vein under the field. The medium grade blood spirit rice is different. It refused me in spring because my farming was too low, and now that farming has reached first order entry level, it accepts. The new line reads first order, high grade, requiring a spiritual vein and taking monster beast flesh and blood as fertilizer. It accelerates its own growth and strengthens the eater's blood and vital energy and physique. So the grade went up and the demands went up with it, and now even this rice wants a spiritual vein under its roots. That seems to be the rule everywhere in this world. The more advanced a thing becomes, the more it must be soaked in spiritual energy, the all-purpose substance that solves every problem I cannot. Planting this rice again will mean doing it on the carefree sex own mountain. The new year had barely finished burning out when I loaded the other 3 little ones with gift boxes and marched them to Dr. Shim's courtyard. Madame Xian scolded me the way she always did, telling me to stop bringing things and meaning none of it. She gave up refusing years ago, mostly because the gifts were never expensive, only strange. Small wooden toys I cut and sanded myself, or a recipe, or a sealed formula, or a jar of homemade wine. Every box carried that flicker of wondering what it would be, which in my old life we called opening a blind box. I fully intend to sell that feeling one day, though not while crooked officials sit on the city and nobody holds coin. So I handed the trick to my uncle Heo Sang, and let him sit on it. We settled into the front room with tea and melon seeds, and Dr. Shim did what Dr. Shim always does. The first time I met the man, he was a soft physician who could go a whole visit without volunteering. 3 sentences, and once he decided you were family, his mouth never closed again. He had treated patients across half the province, so most evenings ran with him telling strange tales, while the 4 of us listened. Madame Xian called dinner and told us to try her pickled fish, since tonight she had cooked the whole table herself to test her lessons. I chewed 1 slice slowly and sat in silence long enough to make her nervous, then gave her a thumbs up and called the balance of flavor excellent. The other 3 cheered and fell on the dishes like locusts. Madame Xian glowed and said that with my blessing she could finally cook for Sangha without shame, and Dr. Shim sighed and wondered aloud when their boy would come home. I had pieced together that wound over the years. The Shim family had 1 son, Shim Sang, who went out to do business 5 years ago and never came back. If a few letters had not arrived each year, the couple would have buried him in their hearts already. This year no letter came at all, and they had carried that worry through the whole winter. A knock landed on the courtyard gate. Dr. Shim muttered about the hour and got up to see, and after a breath I followed him out. The door swung open on a refined young man in brocade, with the bearing of somebody used to being looked at. He started to greet Dr. Shim, caught sight of me, and stopped dead. He asked his father whether the 2 of them had produced another child while he was away, then argued himself out of it. Since the boy did not look 5, every scrap of that bearing fell off him at once. Dr. Shim called him a little rascal who finally remembered the way home, raising a hand and stopping it halfway. This had to be Shim Sang, and judging by the cloth on his back, the venture had gone better than anyone in this house suspected. He played along, flinching from a blow that never came, then caught his father in a hug. Dr. Shim introduced me as Kang Ran, a friend of his regardless of age, and said 2 years of my company had made him and his wife genuinely happy. Then he dragged the boy inside by the sleeve. The whole room lifted with Shim Sang in it, and the old couple had not looked like that in years. He surrendered to the table completely, exclaiming over 1 dish and then the next with his chopsticks still moving. That made the other 3 anxious, and Madame Xian promised another round later. Between mouthfuls he asked whether the recipes were written down, since in his opinion these dishes could carry a tavern alone. I told him I had handed every one of them to his mother. Giving recipes away cost me nothing, and I suspect letting them spread feeds my cooking experience whether I stand at a stove or not. That reminded Dr. Shim to ask flatly whether the business had succeeded or failed. Shim Sang waved it off, took a sip of wine and started talking. He had come home because the imperial court's new policy was almost here, and he meant to be standing in the right place when it landed. Corrupt officials had run wild in Xiansu City for years, and the emperor was furious enough to order a full investigation. A new city lord was already on the road, and to settle the common people, taxes would be waived for 3 full years, agricultural and commercial alike. He finished by calling the region one enormous opportunity that he alone had heard about while everyone else slept. That glossy look lasted 1 more second before his father demolished it. The little rascal had only come home because there was money in the ground here, Dr. Shim declared, then clamped a hand on his son's skull and hammered away while Shim Sang begged for mercy. That head, I noted with respect, held up admirably. When the laughing died, I sat with it. Shim Sang's news would be true. Last year, the rogue cultivators had said the beast tide was nearly finished, and a new official taking office was the signal I had waited for. So the spirit testing ceremony would be starting again, and by my count, the next one falls next year, the year I turn 11. The longer he talked, the wider everyone's eyes went, and his father finally asked whether he had truly made that large a name for himself. What Shi-Sang had built out there was the Hosang trading house. I knew the name from my own intelligence network, a house that had expanded without pause for 3 years until it stood among the 3 largest in the Muyang dynasty. Dr. Shim sniffed that a little money was nothing to strut about. His family keeps a cultivator ancestor somewhere up the line, so they understand this world better than most merchants ever will. Shim Sang understood him perfectly and said he had a backer too. He knows exactly where he stands and entertains no fantasies above it, so the man behind him will protect what he built. Madame Chion ordered everyone to eat while the food was hot, and Shim Sang joked with his mouth full about investing in a restaurant. We left the family their reunion, and I had a feeling the two of us would be sitting across from each other very soon. The next day proved me right, in a private room at Commonweal Machinery. Shim Sang sipped his tea and sighed that he had not expected the famous Commonweal Machinery to belong to Little Ran. The shop was the one Li Bugui handed back to me along with the water pump. I renamed it and rolled out the machines I had been drawing for years, most of them built for farm work. They were convenient and cheap, and the shop's reputation grew faster than I could staff it. Nobody dared try what Li Bugui tried, since I had powerful backing and every piece of paperwork in order. Even so, I had picked no partner. The candidates were either too small to carry a real market or came with a history of misconduct. That kind of house gouges the price on resale until a thing built to help farmers becomes another stone on their backs. Now a suitable one had walked in with my tea in his hand. He had no choice about coming here first, he said, since the pump's reputation kept growing while the pump never left Jiangsu City. Then he fumbled for a phrase and landed on benefiting the common people. Yesterday the man looked half asleep, and in a negotiation room he turned into an oiled hinge. I agreed to the cooperation with one condition, that the selling price never be allowed to run wild. I told him I came from farming stock and knew that hardship, and that Commonweal Machinery exists because I want to lift some of it. Shim Sang put his merchant smile away and nodded, saying he felt the same. The deal closed cleanly, and beyond the water pump there were water wheel huskers, fan impurity removers, and a dozen other conveniences waiting in my drawings. With business done, we drifted into ordinary talk, and he asked whether I was that child prodigy from Owa village who killed the monster beast. He had collected information on his hometown before returning, and found my name near the top of the list. He has cultivators standing behind him, so monster beasts are nothing new to him, and he pressed eagerly for details. When I mentioned what I cultivated, he sighed, since he had not expected a cultivator, let alone one practicing his own family's technique. Then he cheered up, because as he saw it, he had just acquired a powerful backer. After he left, I stood at the window. Snow lay over everything, and the few people in the street were hurrying through it with their heads down. I never wanted to be famous. I wanted a quiet field and a long afternoon. And instead, half of Owa village can recite my life story. It hardly matters. Every scrap of my strength has a traceable origin, and being visible raises my value and pulls resources toward me. I have known for years that serious cultivation from a sect means exposing something. If it came down to the wire, I planned to reveal the breeding ability and blame it on a special physique. A physique cannot be cut out of a man and carried off. And the worst case is that I end up a company slave the way I was in my last life. Grinding the merchants down on price was not entirely noble either. I invent things that do not exist in this world, machinery above all, and the wider they spread, the more forging experience comes back to me. A workman building from my blueprints earns me a fraction of what my own hands would, but the crumbs never stop arriving, and across a dynasty they add up to a meal. Which is why forging sat at minor achievement with only a sliver of bar left. 1 year of running that shop pushed it nearly a fifth of the way up, while I personally forged almost nothing. The rules took some trial and error. The blueprint has to be mine and the maker has to follow it accurately, or nothing counts. A copy made without ever seeing my blueprint pays nothing at all, which is exactly what happened with the pump Li Bugui counterfeited. The other lever is how many people use the things, and by the new year the Hosang trading house would be pushing my machines into every corner of the dynasty. So the system is quietly encouraging me to spread my creations, and the same rule ought to cover bread seeds and brewed potions. That explains why farming climbed so fast on me. In under a month the level came. Forging had reached major achievement with the bar wiped clean, and it carried 2 branches, success rate plus 5% and trait plus 1. That second one baffled me on sight, so I went straight to the forge to experiment. I knocked together a stool. Appraisal told me it was a stool with durability, 18 out of 18, and a trait reading sharpness plus 5%. I stood there with my head empty. Sharpness belongs on a blade. What is a sharp stool supposed to do, and how would anyone ever notice? Then I sat down on it, and I noticed. My trousers tore. When I stood there were 2 clean slits across the calves, neat as scissor work, cut by a stool I made with my own hands. I called it several things I will not repeat, picked the treacherous object up and slammed it into the floor. Durability dropped from 18 to nothing in one stroke, and the whole thing collapsed into a heap of wood chips while I watched. The Muyang year 295 opened right after the new year, and the new official in Cheonsu City wasted no time. The old city lord and every corrupt official under him went into cells, and after that to the block in public view. Nearly 5 continuous years of winter had killed farmers past counting, and turned decent men into bandits. The sky has cleared, and justice has come home, is how the common people put it. I saw it differently. All of it traces back to turmoil in the immortal cultivation world, because without beast tides nobody down here would have dared. So I will reach immortal ascension and become a man that outside forces cannot move. The decree carried 3 years of interest-free loans with it, and declining to pursue old crimes gave the bandits a door out. Being a mountain bandit is never as simple as turning outlaw to dodge a tax you cannot pay. The first thing a recovering court does is suppress bandits and take back whatever they are sitting on. Once you have become one, your only hope is that the chaos lasts or the dynasty falls, which is why most bandits are vicious and live entirely for today. This new official understood whose fault the whole mess was. To settle the people, he opened a path where bandits could register as law-abiding subjects and receive an allotment of land, since years of starvation had left enormous stretches of ground empty. I read the deeper line underneath it easily enough. That was an order from the immortal cultivation world, because no city lord alive issues a general amnesty on his own initiative. The sects lost heavily in the beast tide and now need fresh blood, and more people means more spiritual roots born. The Cheongpung gang answered first, for 3 reasons. They had never committed murder, and 2 years ago they had already begun reforming into something closer to a company from my old life. Second came my connections. The old high officials had mostly fallen and my intelligence chain snapped with them. But money still works, and I had a great deal of it. Third was Shim San Yang, who stood as guarantor, and once the record came back clean, the court was happy to agree, since it made a fine example for everyone else. The Cheongpung gang carried real weight among bandits, so other bands came flocking and nearly all surrendered. A handful of strongholds were too far out of touch to hear the news, still dreaming of raising a banner and crowning themselves emperor, and they set about recruiting soldiers and buying horses. Somebody informed on them the very next day, and the court's army erased them. Once approval came through, the gang was formally renamed Cheongpung Town. Over 500 people were given a straight choice: go home or become registered residents, and very few chose to leave. After the sorting, the town stood at roughly 450 people, more than 100 households, more than 200 acres of farmland, and the main factory building for the civilian machinery. We put in public latrines, sewers, a food street, a commercial street, and public carriages on fixed routes. The mayor was naturally my uncle Heo Sang, and the think tank and law enforcement team were all our own core people. The arrangement with the court held that the town falls under its jurisdiction in name, while the court keeps its hands off until Heo Sang's death. Not 1 copper of the taxes was reduced, and because we answered first, the court threw in preferential terms. The order and convenience of the place badly shook the visiting city lord and the officials of Cheonsu City. The mayor was asked how it had been done, and Heo Sang told them everything, showing off knowledge he got from his nephew. That was deliberate on my part, since none of it cost me anything. All of this moved at a speed that had nothing to do with normal government, because with immortal sex watching over its shoulder, the court ran at its ceiling. In 1 month, it absorbed and allocated the whole thing without disturbing the spring plowing by a day. I sowed in March, transplanted in May, and kept feeding the farming bar as I went, and by July the seedlings entered their maintenance period and handed me back a great deal of time. Cultivation did not fall behind either. My spiritual energy stayed exactly where it was, but the evergreen arc kept climbing and sat at minor achievement somewhat past the halfway mark. On the other ladder, my body refining had pushed well into the back half of layer 3, close enough that layer 4 looked possible before the year ended. The 12th of September earned a small private celebration, purely because teaching finally leveled after 5 years of grinding. Teaching is nothing like learning, which climbs as fast as there is material to swallow. It depends entirely on the other person, and the fatal problem is that I am a child, so even with teacher's authority, a large slice of the population filters itself out on sight. Nobody wants to be taught by somebody whose head reaches their belt. Then there are people like Kiyosomi, who understand a thing the instant it is explained and pay out experience exactly once. Thank heaven for Kangyi. That boy is a walking experience farm, and without him, I would still be waiting. Teaching came in at major achievement with 2 branches, teacher's authority and skill impartation. Skill impartation lets me hand a skill straight to another person, once per person only, and if they study it diligently, the experience flows back to me. In plain terms, I could pour forging into kangi and turn a boy who had failed to learn it for years into a working blacksmith overnight. He is genuinely not built for it, since he topped out at minor achievement and refused to budge, though even that will feed a man in Xiansu City for life. Nobody noticed anything strange about me either, because skill impartation is remarkably discreet. From his side of it, his older brother called him over to practice forging, and then one day the whole craft simply opened up in his head. He knocked out a stool without thinking about it, which delighted Uncle Yun Myeongsang the blacksmith, beyond all measure. The 11th winter I had seen came and went. Everybody celebrated the new year and started laying plans for the next season's planting, and one other thing was finally coming. The spiritual root testing assembly was about to open, and I had signed myself and the other 3 up early. The assembly used to refuse any child over 10, since children under 10 grow a sense of belonging to the sect more easily, and that rule had worried me for years. This year, the immortal sects loosened it completely. Anyone with a spiritual root could join at any age, which caused an enormous stir and pulled the rogue cultivators in as well. Rogue cultivators live hard. No spiritual veins, no spirit stones, no proper techniques, which makes them men with nothing in 3 directions at once. To advance it all, they gamble their lives exploring the immortal caves of dead predecessors. Everyone knew perfectly well that the sects were opening the gate to harvest labor. But what if, just what if, a man could climb further and catch the eye of some elder? People have to have dreams, where there is no difference between a man and a stone. I was working toward this too, and lately the system had not been much help. I called up the panel and read it down. My name sat at the top, Kang Ran. Titles are stacking now, with Child Prodigy currently equipped, then Night Owl, Father of Winter Fishing and Little Divine Doctor behind it. Lifespan 11 years lived against a ceiling of 94. Comprehension ability, 110, 20 of that borrowed from a bonus. My spiritual root row reads wood, its value sitting at 25. The realm rows came next. Body refining set at layer 3 with the bar practically full, and chi refining layer 1 had crawled forward by all of 3%. The evergreen art was better news, well past the middle of minor achievement. The quality of my magical power tempered to profound grade. Appraisal has been at max level since the day I was born, still handing me observation, listening, inquiry, and palpation for free. Then the working skills. Learning holds major achievement a quarter of the way up, carrying photographic memory and experience gain plus 50%. Teaching sits at freshly minted major achievement with teacher's authority and skill impartation. Farming reads first order entry level past the halfway mark, with mutation, harvest plus 10%, and breeding. Forging holds major achievement with success rate plus 5% and the notorious trait plus 1. Medicine refining is nearly out of entry level. Fishing crawls in minor achievement and cooking closes on minor achievement with deliciousness plus 30. Reading it down told me the same story twice. Body refining had stopped moving and no amount of training shifted it, which is what a bottleneck feels like from inside. Chi refining gave me 3% for a year of honest work, so I stopped fighting it and decided to wait for the carefree sect. Forging, medicine refining, and cooking all ride on other people now, on the formulas I taught Dr. Shim and the recipes I left with his wife. Fishing barely moves at all. Hayosomi was hollering through the door asking whether I was ready. I called back that I was coming, tidied up and grabbed the cloth bag of spirit stones I had traded for. The great plaza in Xiansu City was packed shoulder to shoulder and more than half the crowd were children. Scattered through them stood elders and middle-aged men letting their magical power ripple openly. And sure enough, a clear ring of empty stone had opened around each of them. I led our group in, with Father Kang and Uncle Yeon Myeongsang, the blacksmith, behind us. Father Kang warned us to keep away, because those men were immortal masters. Nearby, a boy said loudly that they were all trash who had gotten used to swaggering through the mortal world. They still had the nerve to preen out here, he said, and not one of them had reached the middle stage of chi refining at their age. His father said his given name in a flat warning tone, and the boy allowed that he would say nothing further. Both father and son carried themselves like people who had never queued for anything, and the boy looked about my age. Joyo Chochin stood there thoroughly bored, because in that entire plaza he saw nobody worth a second glance. His family is a renowned cultivation family with an old ancestor at the great perfection of chi refining, steady as Mount Baekdu inside the territory of the 3 sects. He felt my gaze and turned. What he found was a boy in a short, tight-fitting suit with neat, spiky hair, and when the boy saw he had been noticed, he smiled easily, cupped his hands, and offered a greeting. He read Chi Refining Layer 1 off me and came over with nothing better to do. For the record, the short hair is a holdover from my old life, because it is clean and dries fast, and the tight suit moves well and is easy to farm in. He gave his name as Joyo-chan of the Joe family, and said he felt like we were old friends at first sight. The man's bearing shut Father Kang and the others up entirely. I told him young Master Joe could simply call me Kang Ran, and that my family was not a renowned one. I also caught the ripple of his magical power, restrained as it was. He asked whether I could be that child prodigy from Owa village, and behind the warm laugh he was measuring me piece by piece. This one is only chi refining layer 1 and weaker than I am, so how could he have killed the mad wolf single-handed? It must be another version of the story where the beast was already badly injured. Still, the boy has been clever since infancy, and his comprehension ability is excellent, so the acquaintance is worth having. Having settled that with himself, he began chatting, and I was glad to let him, since every sentence taught me something about the immortal realm. Then the assembly officially opened and we both stopped talking. Jo Yochen's father, Jo Young Hong, drifted over having caught part of it. My reputation had spread far enough that even the Jo family had heard, and he assumed the three sects were watching this little fellow too. It would do no harm if his son made friends with me. In the distance, an enormous flying spirit boat slid in and stopped above the plaza. People came down off it through the air, and a giant stone monument came down with them. Jo Yochon clicked his tongue and said they were putting on quite a show, bringing out the spirit testing stele itself, which meant the three sects really had bled badly in this beast tide. I asked what the spirit testing stele actually was. Asking when you do not know is a habit from my old life that has never once cost me anything. He explained that it is a high-grade magic treasure and a sect-guarding necessity with 3 functions. It measures spiritual root, it measures bone age, and it measures the true heart. With the age restriction lifted, he added, every kind of freak had crawled out of the woodwork, and the stele had come along to keep the situation nailed down. He really was a cultivation family son, and surprisingly generous about answering. The cultivator who came to our village years back only laid a hand on the heads of the small children, took away the few with roots, and asked the rest of us nothing. So I asked outright whether a true heart can genuinely be measured. He said true heart is only a manner of speaking, and the real function is lie detection. The stele asks questions, and if you lie, the stele changes. He told me to answer honestly, since the questions run along the lines of what your purpose is in joining the sect, and whether your identity is false. If that was all, then I had nothing to fear. What purpose could I possibly have beyond a place to cultivate and permission to keep farming? My enhanced spirit seeds will not even sprout now without a spiritual vein underneath them. While we talked, the proceedings above had started. The stage divided into 3 sections, one for each of the 3 sects, and 3 figures sat cross-legged on an auspicious cloud overhead, watching. The red-robed strongman in the middle spoke without raising his voice, and every word arrived perfectly clear at the back of the plaza. Those whose names were called should come up, touch the stele, and answer the questions. And with that, the assembly was open. Then he sat down and started gossiping with the other 2. He asked Elder Go whether the Carefree sect had any targets this time. Elder Go answered with his eyes shut that he was rather interested in the child prodigy from Owa village, then turned the question on Young Yan. The veiled woman in purple said she had heard the prodigy was precocious and quick to learn, so his comprehension ability had to be good. The red-robed man, Wu Yun, shot back that it all depends on root aptitude, and added that the Zhou family had brought out their prize son. Elder Go asked which sect the boy was aiming for. Wu Yan said there was no need to ask, since of course it would be the Blazing Flame sect. He sounded like a man who had already settled the matter in his own head, and the 2 beside him only shook their heads in silence. A young disciple in green robes stepped forward and started the testing. The first name called was Ryong Dae-jun, and a small boy was led up by an adult and put his hand flat on the stele. Low-grade fire spiritual root, 8 years old. The disciple read the questions off flatly, asking whether he was disguised, whether he was a spy, whether he had ulterior motives. The boy shook his head blankly. The stele did nothing, and the disciple nodded. 2 people led the child away while a heavy bag went into the adult's hands, and the adult walked off smiling. Call it a reward if you want to be polite. Call it a severance payment if you want to be accurate. That boy will not be coming back, and from today he belongs to the sect. Most disciples cut the ties and live out their lives inside the mountain, because they arrive young and a heart leans toward whatever raised it. That is precisely why the sects used to take only children under 10. Even so, parents fight for a place in that line, because children can be born again, and a family with no money simply starves. Watching that bag change hands, something finally clicked for me. I had never understood why the immortal realm, with every ability required to make mortal lives better, so plainly declines to do it. One wave of a spirit plant cultivator's hand accelerates a crop, so why are there still whole counties that cannot eat? The mortal world is balanced with great care, keeping most people poor without quite killing them, and it is stuffed with incentives for bearing children. All of it exists to make parents hand their children over voluntarily. No matter which world you land in, the people at the bottom are counters on somebody else's board. I let the bitterness sit for one breath and put it down, because there was nothing to be gained from chewing it. There were pitifully few spiritual roots in that crowd. Most walked up full of hope and came back down hollow, and fewer than 10 passed in the whole first stretch, every one of them low grade. Then they called Joyochin. He exchanged a glance with his father, who nodded once, cupped his hands to me, and jumped clean onto the stage while half the plaza gaped and muttered about immortal masters. He raised his hand and laid it on the stele. High-grade fire spiritual root. 12 years old. The disciple reading the result was startled enough that excitement leaked into his voice. Wuyan could not hold back and announced that the Blazing Flame sect wanted this disciple. Asking whether his fellow Taoists objected, Elder Go laughed and told Young Yan he was far too eager since they had agreed the disciple's own opinion would settle it. Then Fairy Huajiup laughed, an ethereal sound that rippled through the men below, and asked whether Joyo Chon had a sect in mind. She mentioned that the wondrous sound pavilion also held a foundation establishment fire legacy. It was cloying and coquettish, and judging by the faces around me, it works on a certain kind of person. I narrowed my eyes and glanced at the two adults and the children beside me. Munju had puffed her cheeks out and was pinching Kangyi's arm with real conviction. Kangyi produced a wail that startled half the row, and Father Kang and Uncle Yeon Myeongsang both coughed hard to paper over the moment. Hayosomi looked up at me, honestly puzzled, and asked why everyone had started coughing. I whispered that the sound just now had been a bit much. She asked whether I meant that older sister's voice because she thought it sounded lovely. I answered with silence. Up on the stage, Joyo-chan had gone red and kept opening his mouth without getting a word out, because the three above him would not stop. One told the fairy it was a bit much for her to get personally involved. Another warned her not to ruin the young man's future, and she protested that she would do no such thing. When the noise died down, Joyo Chochin thanked the three seniors and said this disciple already had a beloved sect in mind, then named the Blazing Flame sect. Wu Yan laughed out loud and told him that with such aptitude he could enter as an inner sect disciple directly. Everyone assumed the assembly would keep rolling quietly from there, since 11 people had passed the true heart test without incident. Then the very next man up turned out to be a stubborn fool, or perhaps he genuinely had no idea a true heart test existed, which would be fair enough, since I only knew because Joyo-chon told me. He walked onto the stage wearing an arrogant expression. Medium-grade metal spiritual root, 34 years old. Nothing wrong so far. Then the disciple beside him read the questions out, and the entire stele turned red and blazed like a struck forge. He used some method I did not recognize, folded himself into a black wind, and tore off toward the horizon. A spiritual light shot out of the spirit boat, caught the wind, and the man came down wailing onto the stone. And two disciples flew after him with a rope that bound him tight. It was not over. Several more figures broke from the crowd and bolted in different directions, and not one of them slipped the grasp of the three sects. Somebody above scoffed that there were people blind enough to plot against the immortal sects. Whatever those methods were, they had nothing to do with mortals, and I wondered whether that is what a spell looks like from the outside. The testing rolled on and my turn came up soon after. Kang Gi shouted from below that Brother Ran could definitely do it. He and Moonju had just been tested. Neither of them had a spiritual root, and neither looked the least bit crushed. Uncle Yeon Myeongsang went the same way, disappointed for a moment, and then smiling. Nobody in our families is poor anymore, and a spiritual root might have meant saying goodbye for good. Maybe Father thinks about it that way too. I looked over, and Father Kang smiled, nodded, and told me to go and that I was the best. He knew that today his son would spread his wings and leave for somewhere far away. He said nothing about it, but everything gathered in his eyes came across anyway. Your mother and I cannot give you the thing you want. At the very least, we refuse to be the stone in your road. So go, fly as far as you can, and we will wait for you to come home. For one moment, I honestly considered giving it up, because with the system there would always be another way. Then I remembered the monster beast coming into the village, and what it would mean to stand there without strength and watch a tragedy finish itself in front of me. I told him yes, and I went. I did not leap onto the stage the way Joyochin had, and instead climbed the steps one at a time like a farm boy. That drew every eye in the plaza anyway, purely because the name Kang Ran had gotten famous around Cheonsu City lately. Somebody asked whether that was the prodigy, and somebody else insisted a boy who hunts monster beasts at that age must have extraordinary rude aptitude. Two stout figures watched me with complicated faces, Lee Bugui and his son, both noticeably thinner than the last time I saw them. On the stage, my name drew attention of its own kind. Joyo Chonin stood behind Wu Yan with his eyes fixed on me, openly expectant. Wu Yan asked whether that was the prodigy. Elder Go answered that it was, that the boy should be cultivating the evergreen art, and that his magical power had already been tempered to profound grade. By then I had reached the stele, and touching it stirred my magical power slightly, which let the three of them read my nature outright. Elder Go said the evergreen art made sense, since the technique is a dime a dozen these days and probably came out of some senior's immortal cave. He was not wrong. It was once a rare first-order profound-grade technique, and the first man to obtain it set off a scramble among the chi refining families. As more copies surfaced, everyone concluded it must have circulated widely in ancient times, and these days, any wood spiritual root cultivator without something better cultivates it. Then the announcement came: low-grade wood spiritual root, age 11. The disciple reading it out sounded thoroughly bewildered, since he clearly knew my background and the result left him nowhere to stand. The spirit-testing stele, however, does not make mistakes. Fairy Huajiep said what a pity, a low-grade wood spiritual root, and Wu Yan echoed her and called it a waste of that comprehension ability. Elder Go offered that perhaps the boy could still forge a Tao within the art of immortal cultivation, which was him quietly building me an exit. With aptitude like mine, there was really only one door open, the Carefree sect, which is mostly wood roots and carries a spirit plant master legacy. The other two sects had no use for me whatsoever. Joyo-chin sighed with genuine regret, returned my nod when I offered it, and then stopped paying attention to me. The contrast with his earlier warmth was not subtle. My reputation was large, but the moment my root aptitude was read aloud, we stopped being people from the same world. When I reach Foundation Establishment, ran his thinking, Kang Ran will still be grinding through chi refining and will not walk beside me. Below the stage, my results set off a whole spread of human nature, sighs and pity, and a fair amount of quiet satisfaction. My young companions cheered when I passed, and then Kang Gi and Moonju drooped, understanding that everyone who had grown up together was about to be split apart. Zhou Yang Hong congratulated Father Kang politely, then said he had business elsewhere and removed himself. Father Kang was indignant and said so. A moment ago the man was falling over himself to make friends, and the instant my son's aptitude came in low, he suddenly has somewhere to be. I withdrew my hand and walked to the side queue, where everyone who had passed was waiting except Zhou Yochin. Presumably they would ask our intentions once the ceremony ended. Two adults nodded at me as I came up, and I nodded back. The talk in the crowd did not bother me, since I know my own situation better than any of them. I began this life with no spiritual root at all, so being able to cultivate is already a gift, and with a system I can pile resources high enough to force a road anywhere. The evergreen art breaking through also taught me that my root will grow. If anything, the result suited me better than a good one would have. With my aptitude out where everybody can see it, I blend back into the crowd, and then I can farm in peace. I chose the Carefree sect for the legacy first, and for a spiritual vein second, and their spirit plant peak fits exactly. A familiar name cut through my thinking: Li Moon. The Li father and son came up and nodded the way people do when old grievances are settled. Li Moon had no spiritual root, and the two of them walked off the stage with their heads down. From this day there will be no further point of contact between those two families at all. Something desolate settled on me while I watched them go, because familiar people were leaving all afternoon, and it was beginning to look like I would be walking on alone. Then they called Heyo Somi. That one I was easy about, since we confirmed years ago that she carried a root. High-grade water spiritual root, age 10. The plaza went off like a dropped crate, a second high-grade root, and above the stage they were fighting over her before the echo died. Fairy Huajiep stated flatly that the Wondrous Sound Pavilion would take this disciple. Elder Go chuckled and suggested they might first ask the little girl her opinion, and every eye in the plaza swung to Somi. Somi could not process a single one of those questions. All she knew was that everyone was staring and that she wanted to go home. She has been frightened of crowds since she was small, and with a timid nature like hers, she deals with strangers by hiding behind whoever she trusts. Under a few thousand stares, her heart went to pieces, and her eyes came looking for me at the edge of the stage. I caught the distress signal, sighed, and hurried forward. Living with her for years has taught me exactly how far inward she can retreat, though nothing had pushed her this far in a long time. I took her hand, bowed to the figures above us, and told the seniors that my sister is very shy, and had cost everyone time. Only then did the stage understand, having spent a full minute watching a small girl tremble and say nothing. Elder Go's wrinkled face folded into a smile. He said shyness is normal in a little girl, and since I was her brother, asked whether I could help her choose. Fairy Huajiop suggested I send my sister to the Wondrous Sound Pavilion, where an Earth-grade Waterdao legacy waited in Foundation Establishment would present no difficulty later. Inwardly, she was cursing her luck and wondering how Kang Ran had become a variable in her afternoon. Wu Yan stayed quiet with the face of a man enjoying a play, since the Blazing Flame sect already had its high-grade genius. Somi poked her small head out from behind me, gathered up all the courage she owned, and said she wanted to be with her brother. Elder Go, radiating grandfatherly warmth, asked what Kang Ran's intention was. So now the entire plaza understood that the fate of a high-grade water spiritual root girl rested on the opinion of her low-grade wood spiritual root brother. Nobody there had expected to see a low-grade root at the center of a bidding war. Fairy Huajiep turned the charm on me directly. The Wondrous Sound Pavilion also holds a Wood Dao legacy, she said, and the one thing it never lacks is female disciples, accomplished in every art and attentive in kind. Unlike the carefree sect, she added, which is packed wall to wall with big hairy men, she was running a honey trap on an 11-year-old with a straight face. Elder Go demanded to know who said his sect had no beauties, since their young miss is famous across all three sects. She then mentioned that the pavilion also keeps a high-grade wood spiritual root elder. Elder Go snapped that where Wood Dao legacies are concerned, if the carefree sect calls itself second, nobody dares call themselves first. Then he stopped talking and simply looked at me, because his school holds no advantage in the beauty department. The last high-grade wood root they wanted had been charmed away by the pavilion in precisely this manner. Both of them waited on my answer, and I finally understood how Zhou Youchen had felt, since when these people grabbed for a disciple, their mouths never stopped long enough for the disciple to speak. I stepped forward, neither humble nor arrogant, and said loudly that this junior had fixed on a goal before coming here, and wished to join the carefree sect. Fairy Huijup urged me to think it over, then sent a private message to Elder Go proposing that the high-grade water root come to her pavilion instead. Elder Go asked whether she had not taken in a high-grade wood root not long ago, and reminded her what she had said then. Disciples have their own choices, and we must respect them. She had nothing to answer with, so she sniffed that the girl's heart nature was poor and her achievements would be limited. Elder Go replied that the fairy need not trouble herself. Elder Go, in high spirits after finally winning a round, waved us both over. I led Somi across to his side, and the show ended there. The testing went on, and I felt a gaze land on the side of my head. Joyo Choshin was staring hard, at me and then at Hyo Somi behind me. A moment ago you ignored me the instant my aptitude was read out, and now your eyes have found my sister. I pulled her further behind me and stood in the way. Evening came and everyone had settled on a sect. The tokens were handed out, the crowd broke up, departure was set for the next morning, and that left one night for goodbyes. At the Shim family manor, they laid out a huge table and a large crowd sat around it congratulating each other and talking over one another. Most of the attention landed on Somi and me, with people saying nobody would have guessed that little Somi was a high-grade spiritual root genius. Her cheeks went scarlet and she hid behind me again. Dr. Shim boasted at his wife that his judgment had been accurate all along, and Madame Xian smiled and said she had never once claimed to doubt it. She had only just learned that her husband kept a senior immortal master behind him, and had handed a cultivation technique to me. Father Kang thanked him and said that without that technique his son could never have reached this day. It was flattery, since he had gotten a precious thing for free, but sometimes a throwaway line happens to be the exact truth. I owe my spiritual root to it, and without it I might never have had a chance at a sect gate. Then Father Kang started lecturing the two of us and would not stop. We siblings had to support each other, make friends in the sect, seek knowledge humbly and never cause trouble. Both of us listened to every word. I nodded hard and told him he knew my character perfectly well, and reminded him it was not as though we could never come back. Shim Sang congratulated us too, and I walked him through the business and told him to take everything to my uncle Heo Sang from now on. The dinner ran until the small hours before anyone was willing to break it up. The next morning everyone gathered. Most boarded the flying boat and it lifted away, leaving Somi and me where we stood. Elder Go explained that the others were bound for Nine Yang Immortal City and would return once the local testing conventions finished. Then he laughed and said the two of us had excellent aptitude, and it would be a pity if anything happened, so this old Taoist would escort us personally. That would be Somi. He added that Elder Wu Yan of the Blazing Flame sect had already left with Joyo Chun, then produced a small wooden boat that swelled out of thin air into something we could stand on. I asked whether anyone would come after us. He sighed and said a beast tide had struck the sect a while back, and its grip on the region had slipped, so rogue cultivators and demonic cultivators were surfacing constantly. Then he told me not to worry, since an old Taoist has strength enough. That reassurance worried me considerably. In the end, I was overthinking it, and we reached the sect without incident. The Carefree sect was founded by the Carefree Master, a foundation establishment great perfection cultivator, and himself, a personal disciple of the Verdant Wood Immortal Master. The whole territory of the three sects was opened up within the last 100 years, and all three are branch sects split from the three core formation sects inside Nine Yen territory. The mountain gate sits on a second-order high-grade spiritual vein, and through terraforming they raised 4 peaks on it. Main Peak, Alchemy Peak, Spirit Beast Peak, Spirit Plant Peak, and that list is also the order of their standing. The one I wanted comes dead last, its spiritual energy barely scraping into second-order low-grade, which suited me perfectly. An old man took us to an immortal cave on Spirit Plant Peak, and he turned out to be the Peak Master himself, Lim Ji-sung. The place was enormous, with a formation laid outside it, and inside sat 3 acres of spirit field, with an old farmer already working the rows. Once Lim Ji-sung had delivered us, he offered a few words of encouragement and left. Somi asked whether this was going to be our home now, since she had never lived anywhere this large. I told her we would tidy up today and that I would learn how everything worked tomorrow. A month went by like that. I was up before the light doing my morning exercise in the courtyard. A full month inside the sect and not one person had taught me anything, so every scrap came from self-study. I had expected a school from my old life, with instructors and supervision and a schedule, and what I got was free range. Acquiring a master here is entirely a matter of luck. Some people get noticed by an elder while walking down a path, and beyond that the only route is standing out at the sect grand competition. New disciples go to the scripture pavilion and pick a cultivation technique. Somi chose the Azure Water Scripture, a profound grade technique that carries a cultivator to foundation establishment grade perfection. Only the first 3 layers are open to her now, and the rest unlocks at Chi Refining Layer 3. You have to hand it to a high-grade root. She felt the spiritual energy stir on the first day, and that only because learning the technique ate most of it. Within a week she stood at Chi Refining Layer 1, and within a month she had passed me outright. I already had the evergreen art, so I picked the body refining technique instead, the Mystic Turtle Force. It runs 10 layers and reaches body refining great perfection. The introduction sells its Mystic Turtle Protection and Formidable Defense, which is not what I wanted it for. What I wanted sits at the 10th layer, an ability called Mystic Turtle Energy Draw. During exercise, it pulls water-attributed spiritual energy in to temper and wash the physical body, and that energy is not consumed but adds to one's chi refining cultivation instead. Enormously useful for a water root and mildly useful for a wood one, so it helps Somi and me at once. Swapping techniques between disciples is not permitted, and the punishment if you are caught is severe. The sect also cannot watch everyone every hour, so in practice a thing that is never caught never happened. What outranks staying alive anyway? So I used photographic memory to record the Mystic Turtle Force without a single error, and set Somi to cultivating it too. In a few years, once the contribution points are there, she may exchange for a legitimate copy and register it. I walked in the gate already at Body Refining Layer 3, so the new technique moved fast on that foundation. Inside a month I reached its 3rd layer, and the Mystic Turtle Force reads Minor Achievement about a quarter of the way along, with the branch ability Mystic Turtle Protection attached. Working through it also explained my long stall at Body Refining Layer 3. My training was haphazard, so the body was never fully tempered, and there were subtle regions I had never trained at all. With every gap filled, I broke smoothly into Body Refining Layer 4, which immediately created a problem, since I have no technique for the stage after that, and would have to go to the Scripture Pavilion. Exchanging for 1 means exposing my body refining cultivation, and that means bringing out the blood spirit rice to explain how a boy my age got here. Fortunately, I laid the groundwork back in Owa village, and the story is plausible enough. Cultivators have methods nobody warns you about though, so I may end up exposing breeding as well. I want to sound out the sect's attitude towards special physiques first, and there is time. In the meantime, I can push chi refining instead, especially since I am carrying an enormous amount of debt. The Carefree sect is not a charity, and handing resources to new disciples is simply the more efficient way to harvest the crop later. Somi and I are inside the training period, where we do no work, receive resources anyway, and are asked only to cultivate. Everything has a price. The task quota accrues quietly the entire time, and comes due at 15, and failing to repay it stops the resources cold. Let that run 3 more years and you are put to forced labor. The remedy is straightforward. Do tasks, or trade spirit stones for contribution points at 120 stones for every 100. And note that spirit stones only ever flow inward. My sect token names me an outer sect disciple of the Carefree sect, with no contribution points earned yet and no task quota run up. A set amount is deducted at year's end, and as long as the number never goes negative, the distribution keeps arriving. Contribution points are counted separately, never decrease, and buy the rare things behind the counter. In my eyes, this place is a company, the task quota is a performance review, and missing your number means no salary. The sun climbed while I finished the morning exercise. I made breakfast, we ate, Somi cleaned up after us, and I went to work. The medicine field sat under the old farmer's eye and the work was easy. Spirit nurturing art on a set schedule, spirit rain art every 3rd day, and the rest of the hours walking the rows for weeds and insects. Anything in poor condition has to be identified and treated. It is no different from what I did in the mortal world, and it is also the whole job of a spirit farmer. The old farmer nodded and said I had fully mastered this medicine field, since in 1 month I had every operation down with no mistakes and no material lost. He had never had an outer sect disciple this comfortable to supervise. The only thing he could not work out was why I proved incapable of learning the spirit rain art, and he concluded my water root must be too weak. Luckily, he said, there was a sister. Then he told me he could safely leave this land to me and would put in a good word with the Peak Master. I asked whether Elder Lee was leaving. The old man had wanted to retire for years and had never been given anyone to hand the fields to until I arrived. He said that was right. Half a lifetime of cultivation and nothing to show for it. A low-grade spiritual root. And he repeated the word hard 3 times like a man setting down a load. He had saved a little money and meant to spend his remaining decades out in the mortal world. He looked at me with real feeling then, because a boy with the same low-grade root reminded him of himself at that age. I had good comprehension ability, he said, so if I could manage it I should learn one of the 4 crafts, formation or alchemy or artifact or talisman. Being a spirit farmer has no future in it. Then he walked off to pack his bags and go home. I watched that unsteady figure until it turned the corner, and my Tao heart said a little harder. I will seize every chance that comes near me and I will reach immortality. Spring came and went, and a year vanished out from under me. Inside the carefree sect, the 4 seasons all behave like spring, so I never even felt it pass. The first light found me doing morning exercises, the only slot in the day I can give to body refining now. Once the sun was up, I went back into the immortal cave and put together a solid breakfast. The sect sells grain fasting pills, but I still prefer 3 meals and a hot stove, partly because cooking will not train itself, and mostly because a plain meal with family keeps a person human. Somi came out of the training room announcing a breakthrough to layer 2, pulled out a chair and waited to be fed. I brought the food over on cue, congee and steamed buns and soy milk, and told her she was truly my sister, breaking into chi refining layer 2 inside a single year. She stuffed a bun into her mouth and said it was thanks to Brother Ran handling the farming that she had time to cultivate. That is roughly the deal we struck. I stay busy and she puts every waking hour into cultivating, because in this world strength decides everything. Her aptitude got her admitted as an exceptional intersect disciple, and without strength she will never hold any of it. I am not worried about myself, since body refining layer 4 sits under me. I told her to concentrate on cultivating and leave the tasks to me, and to please stop making things worse. She protested that she could remove pests perfectly well. Then her voice trailed away as her memory caught up. I reminded her that the last time she helped me remove pests she trampled 2 silver moon flowers. She said fine. She understood and she would not cause trouble, then took a bite of bun big enough to fill both cheeks. The 2 of us needling each other is the ordinary weather of this cave. Then I asked her to cast a spirit rain art today, because I thought we would be able to harvest. At that point our task quota stood at 1100 in the whole. Disciples of different ranks carry different quotas, with an outer sect disciple owing 100 a year, and an inner sect disciple 1000. Luckily today was harvest day, so we could complete a task and sell the surplus spirit medicine for contribution points, and both of those pushed the quota back up. The 2 of us had casually named the place the Waterwood Immortal Cave. Its standing sect task is to submit 50 complete sets of chi-gathering pill herbs every 3 years, in exchange for 2,000 contribution points. The 3 acres grow exactly those ingredients: silver moon flower on a 3-year cycle, flow firegrass and constant heartgrass on 1 year each. Silver moon flower yields 60 portions an acre at 15 points a portion, and the other 2 yield 30 portions an acre every year at 5 points a portion. Full production across 3 years comes to 60 complete sets, 10 of which are the loss margin the sect accepts. What they want is obvious, since a complete set sells for 5 points more than the same herbs sold apart, and finishing the triennial task adds another 500. Gather 50 sets inside 3 years, and worry about the rest afterward. Today happened to be harvest day for all 3 herbs at once, since the silver moon flowers were already 2 years into their cycle before I arrived. After breakfast we walked out to the medicine field. Somi went first with her spirit rain art, and after this morning's breakthrough she handled it more smoothly than ever. Then I laid on the spirit nurturing art, which sits at minor achievement with 3/4 of the bar filled, carrying spell cost reduced by 20% and growth speed plus 5%. All 3 crops read at full ripeness. I took out a medicine hoe and worked down the rows, 1 plant at a time, laying everything into my storage pouch, standard issue on entry and good for 3 cubic meters. Somi called from the ridge asking whether I needed help. I told her no and to go back and cultivate, without turning my head, and she went off looking slightly wounded. By afternoon, every plant was in and we had both missed lunch. Back at the cave, a meal waited on the table. 1 meat dish, 1 vegetable, 1 soup, gone stone cold hours ago. My chest went warm anyway. I am lucky to have a sister that thoughtful, and I ate the whole cold thing gratefully. Then I sorted the harvest. 66 portions of silver moon flower, 33 of flow firegrass, 33 of constant heartgrass. 1 more year and the sect task is finished. Farming did nearly all of the heavy lifting. It reads, First Order, minor achievement, a little under halfway up, with mutation, harvest plus 10%, breeding and now growth speed plus 20%, which unlocked at minor achievement, stacked with the spirit nurturing art that comes to 25% altogether. The other 2 herbs should have matured well after the silver moon flower, and instead they came in 2 months early and landed on the same day. I pulled out 30 complete sets and sealed the remainder in the warehouse, built into the cave out of solid jade to keep spiritual energy lost near nothing. 30 is enough for this trip, since the task only asks for 50 inside 3 years. What I urgently needed was points, and 30 sets come to 900 contribution points, the same as 900 spirit stones. Being a spirit plant cultivator pays surprisingly well, though seeds and other expenses will start eating into it. Monster beasts, by comparison, are apparently worth nothing. No, the truth is that those rogue cultivators fleeced me blind. I always knew the materials off the Mad Wolf were undervalued, but this is another thing entirely, since a first-order monster beast's hide and bones came to 13 spirit stones. Never mind. I walked away from that deal with a mountain of information, which was what I actually needed. I went to the bus stop on Spirit Plant Peak and caught the bus bird to the Merit Hall. Bus bird is my own name for it. A first-order low-grade giant bird large enough to carry passengers. Spirit Beast Peak runs it on fixed stops and fixed routes, exactly like the buses of my previous life. The Merit Hall is where you exchange contribution points and accept tasks, and compared with the sleepy quiet of Spirit Plant Peak, the traffic is brutal. The line ran the length of the room, and the senior sisters working the counter looked thoroughly overwhelmed. Then a voice cut across the whole hall, loud and pleased with itself. Was that not the low-grade child prodigy, finally out of seclusion and still sitting at Chi Refining Layer 1 after a full year? Where did he find the nerve to occupy an immortal cave and refuse to leave? And a first-order high-grade cave at that. Every head in the hall turned. The newcomer was dressed like a young master and trailed 2 lackeys, the complete dandy package. I frowned, sighed, and turned around. I asked young master why he insisted on targeting a newly inducted disciple, and suggested that if he wanted an immortal cave, he go and win one at the Sect Grand Competition. He complained that saying so was useless, since he was still 3 years short of 15. Somi and I had simply gotten lucky. An inner sect disciple was promoted just after we joined and vacated the Waterwood Immortal Cave, and by the rules it goes to whoever asks first. That set a number of disciples grinding their teeth, Cho Pung foremost among them. He waved his fan and sneered that 3 years was nothing, and that without such a fine sister I would never have been qualified to enjoy a cave like that. I rolled my eyes and thanked him for the reminder. My sister is well behaved, sensible and exceptionally talented, and I have benefited enormously from her. All of which is true. Then I asked how much of the Spirit Plant Master's craft he had actually mastered, and whether he was not embarrassed to keep standing on this peak. I added that the Peak Master is wise and fair, because if that cave had gone to him, the sect could not buy a chi gathering pill anywhere. That last part is an exaggeration, since my cave is hardly the only plot growing those ingredients. If my rose stopped producing, though, the price of chi gathering pills would drift upward over time, and everyone in that hall knew it. Then his little follower jumped out to earn his keep. Cultivators naturally prioritize cultivation, he announced. And anything we cannot do ourselves, we simply hire somebody to do. A lowly profession like Spirit Plant Master, he said, is only valued by people with low-grade spiritual roots. The Merit Hall went completely silent. I was stunned for a second, then looked at Ochopung with nothing but pity, because a lackey like that will bury a man. The follower read the silence as admiration and set his hands on his hips, very proud of himself. I reminded the senior brother gently that the Peak Master is also a Spirit Plant Master. His face fell apart and he turned to his master, who stared back with an expression from a nightmare, smacked him with the fan, and told him to get out. The whole hall burst into laughter. Chopung sneered at me to enjoy my final 3 years, then walked away, faster the closer he got to the exit. His words are harsh, but the man certainly runs well. I got back in the queue. As for the threat itself, I understood it perfectly. The protected period runs until 15, and after that you stand on your own feet. The first thing you must do is clear the task quota, and among the outer sect disciples there are always some who cannot and get put to forced labor. Completing tasks normally builds quota and contribution points together, and 100 contribution worth of tasks in a year also earns the sect's resource supply. Forced labor pays no contribution points at all, which is a serious loss. Is there a way around it? There is. Because wherever a policy exists, countermeasures grow beside it. At 15, you can borrow spirit stones from wealthy peers and contribute them, since 120 stones buys 100 contribution points and 100 task quota. Then you spend the points on resources, hand those to the lender, and the transaction closes cleanly. The sect did not stop it when they found out. They simply took a share by moving the rate and pocketing 20 stones on every transfer. There is also an annual ceiling, with outer sect disciples buying only 100 contribution a year, and inner sect disciples 1,000. Restrictions or not, an entire industry grew out of the gap. Anyone with family money lends at high interest, and there is no shortage of people eager for that business, which means a wealthy scion can simply cut off that road for somebody he dislikes. That is exactly what Ochopeng is doing to my sister and me. As for why he was so certain we would lose the cave, that comes down to the most common unspoken rule in the cultivation world. Strength decides everything. Good caves flow to the strong. And when I turn 15, the sect grand competition falls in exactly that year. But is he really so sure I will lose? With a body refining layer 4 foundation under me, I will certainly improve across 3 years. On top of that, when I turn 15, Somi will still be inside her protected period, and the cave actually belongs to her, since she is the intersect disciple of this household. Perhaps they have all misunderstood because she keeps such a low profile. The farce ended, but my identity kept the room talking. Somebody asked whether that was the low-grade child prodigy, and somebody else said yes and what a pity it was. Another pointed out that his comprehension ability is genuinely remarkable, since he mastered the spirit plant master's work in 1 month, and can raise chi-gathering pill herbs alone. Somebody said they had studied 2 years and only just learned the breeding art. Then somebody asked whether anyone had actually seen the sister with the high-grade root, and every head in earshot shook. I ignored it and went back to allocation. Silver Moonflower needs 3 uninterrupted years, and the field has to be rotated to keep any fertility, which is why the other 2 acres carry only 30 spirit medicines. Planting the other 2 herbs for the full 3 years would be wasteful, since my farming guarantees full yield while shortening the growing time, which means 2 acres come free for a year, and I know what goes into them. Blood Spirit Rice. The Carefree sect keeps a whole Spirit Beast peak, so monster beast flesh will be no problem. With Blood Spirit Rice back in the ground, body refining would move faster than it ever had. By now I know the work and I have a decent read on the sect's attitude. A year of quiet investigation told me that exposing breeding alone would be completely fine. The sect already houses special physiques far more heaven-defying than mine, and that man does not merely survive here. He became a noble foundation establishment cultivator on a low-grade spiritual root, and I have met him. He is the peak master of Spirit Plant Peak, Lim Ji-sung. He carries the medicine spirit physique, and whenever he chooses, he can spend some of his own lifespan to accelerate a plant's growth. Years ago, the sect lacked the golden jade spirit fungus it needed to refine foundation establishment pills, and Lim Ji-sung was already pressing against his limit at 60. Missing that chance would have left his prospects thin to nothing. Forced by circumstance, he revealed his innate ability, ripened the fungus himself, and asked the sect to refine a pill for him in return. The Carefree sect did not disappoint him. On learning what he could do, they refused to squeeze him at all and instead went all out gathering lifespan pills to replace everything he had burned. They prepared several foundation establishment spirit items alongside the pill itself, so his breakthrough would hold. His lifespan rose enormously, far enough that he can live 200 years, and he became the peak master of Spirit Plant Peak. Set beside a peak master like that, my breeding is a trivial little thing. Soon enough, the queue delivered me to the counter. I put my earlier plan into action, and after some effort, the purpose of this trip was successfully achieved. I went back to the Waterwood Immortal Cave a happy man. 60 silver moonflower seeds cost 180 contribution points. 60 seeds of the other 2 varieties cost 60, and 100 pounds of first-order low-grade monster beast made another 100. With the recording stone at 100 more, the spree came to 440 and left 460 over. The task quota counted under the Waterwood Immortal Cave, so my sister and I shared it. I worked the accounts twice, because a man poor in 2 lives never trusts a figure he added once. I had not expected beast meat to run so dear. On a first-order early-stage beast, the teeth and claws are worthless, since nobody forges a decent magic treasure out of them. The whole value sits in the meat, which pushes a body refiner along, so 13 spirit stones was fair. Formation masters, on the other hand, are highway robbers in very nice robes, since 1 first-order recording formation sells for 100 spirit stones. I meant to record the blood spirit rice from first shoot to harvest, compile the run into data, and hand it to the sect for contribution points. It would also prove I was worth keeping, so the 3-year clock on the Immortal Cave did not frighten me. Somi and I ate properly that evening, beast meat and all, and the little girl put away bowl after bowl and asked for more. Then she set her chopsticks down and said she wanted a skill of her own. She felt useless leaning on her brother when her own task quota was the highest in the household. After 15, she would owe 4,000 quota, and even with 4 years, she could barely scrape it together. What actually worried her was that I would never manage mine. I agreed and said I would look through the scripture pavilion in the morning. When I asked what she had in mind, she said without hesitation that she wanted the strongest one and the one that made the most money. I told her that meant formations, since formations print money, and she thanked me with the pleased little chirp she saves for winning. My plan was to buy a few first-order formations, test her aptitude, and keep investing if it took. Then I asked how the Mystic Turtle Force was coming, and she got awkward and slowly held up 1 finger. 1 year, and body refining layer 1. It is the finest body refining technique for a water spiritual root, and she ate blood spirit rice through most of her childhood, so her talent for the body is simply not there. The technique normally requires body refining layer 4 before a cultivator may even learn the mystic turtle protection. And I am an exception because I cheat. I told her to keep at it since everything gets easier once my blood spirit rice comes in. She always does exactly what I say, which is either very sweet or very worrying. After morning exercise the next day, I called up the panel and read it down. My name at the top, then my titles. Child prodigy in the equipped slot with Night Owl. Father of winter fishing, and little miracle doctor behind it. Lifespan, 12 of 99. Comprehension ability 110, with a bonus of 20 on top, and my spiritual root reading wood at 30. Then the cultivation line, body refining layer 4, and chi refining layer 1, with the evergreen art carrying a mana quality of mysterious. Learning had reached major achievement and still held photographic memory and an experience gain bonus of half again. Farming sat at first order minor achievement with mutation, harvest plus 10%, breeding and growth speed plus 20%, while cooking hovered a hair short of its next rung. That was a whole year of my life and a handful of rows, and the rest have barely moved. Once you break into body refining layer 4, the gains go thin without spiritual items, which is why an acre was now under blood spirit rice. Today I meant to collect the last 3 levels of the Mystic Turtle Force, which the sect gives free to any body cultivator who reaches the middle stage. Chi refining is where I am stuck, and there is no clever road through it except pills I cannot afford. At my pace, 1 layer takes 4 years, 10 layers 40, and the middle and late stages only slow me further. No wonder they say a low-grade spiritual root has no hope of foundation establishment. Reaching chi refining great perfection before 60 is difficult, and 60 matters because of the physical body barrier. Past 60, a cultivator's blood and vital energy thin out, and that barrier becomes almost impossible to force. But there is still a road, and I found it in the records. Some cultivators with poor spiritual root aptitude turn out to have enormous body refining talent, and if the body establishes its foundation first, the physical body barrier stops applying. All that remains is finishing foundation establishment before 150. That road hands over a lifespan of 150 years, while chi refining great perfection gives only 120. Nobody stops at the body though, since foundation establishment great perfection pays out 240. With my talent and my own blood spirit rice, the road is open even if my spiritual root never improves again. The evergreen art has been quietly carrying me while the realm itself crawls. Its mana quality of mysterious gives 20% to cultivation speed, half again on recovery with a flat point on top, and half again on total mana. Pushing it to major achievement handed me 5 points of spiritual root and 1 more of recovery. A root value of 30 cannot be far off medium grade, and the difference from 25 shows in how much spiritual energy comes when I sit down. With the arithmetic done, I went out and started the day's work. The medicine field went in on plan. 60 silver moon flowers first, and flowing firefly grass alone in the other 2 plots. Then 1 acre of blood spirit rice where the silver moon flowers had stood, since it asks little of the soil and lets tired ground recover while still producing. Next year the 2 would swap and constant heart grass would take the rice plot. Staggered like that, 3 years lines up beautifully. I called Somi out to water, laid the spirit nurturing art over the plot, and tender shoots came up while we watched. She made a delighted noise and said a spiritual field really was something else. At that pace, I told her we might harvest in about 6 months. Medium grade takes 2 full years by the book, though the mortal world's climate ran it closer to 1, and this was high grade, which ought to take longer still. Between my skill levels, the spirit nurturing art and the spiritual field, half a year looked achievable even without beast flesh, and with the meat it would come faster. Early the next morning, I took the busbird out to the scripture pavilion. The elder on duty looked surprised when I asked for the body refining middle stage section of the Mystic Turtle Force, since I had received it only a year ago. I told him he was welcome to appraise it, walked to the testing stale and threw a punch. Wind slapped across the floor, and the staley lit. 1 layer, 2, until 4 layers of light declared body refining layer 4. He said it was not bad and waved me through, thinking behind that mild face that Peakmaster Lim had been right about my secret. I said I knew the rules, then asked him to exchange a few other things while he was at it. He looked the list over and remarked that a low-grade first-order formation, alchemy, artifact refining, and talisman legacy at once meant I had come into money. I asked for 1 jade slip for the formation legacy. Pavilion rules forbid taking a legacy out of the building, so anything you carry must be pressed into a temporary slip that only 1 person may ever view. They cost 10 contribution points each, the first free. For Somi it was worth it, since a jade slip is a disc from my old life with a very rude copy protection scheme. For myself, photographic memory records everything word for word. I walked out with 4 legacies because I had a theory to test. Farming lines up cleanly with a first-order spirit planter, so if that holds, forging and medicine making should have immortal arts behind them. Formation cost 100, alchemy 100, artifact refining 50, and talisman 20, which left me 180 and a fresh appreciation for how fast points evaporate. Formation is tied with alchemy at the top of the immortal arts, and a low-grade copy costing 5 times a talisman says so plainly. That price is the Sex family discount, since outside these mountains, one recording formation alone runs 100 spirit stones. I walked toward the legacy chamber, and behind me the elder drew out a transmission talisman and sent it away as a thread of spiritual light. Inside the main peak, Lim Ji-sung gathered that light out of the air and folded it into a talisman in his palm. The sect master, Baek Ji-shin, asked what it was, and Lim called it a small matter, and asked whether he remembered the Kang siblings who joined a year ago. Baek Ji-shin recalled for a moment and laid out both children accurately. The elder brother was steady, with high comprehension ability and real talent, saddled with a low-grade spiritual root. The younger sister carried a high-grade spiritual root, but was painfully introverted. If only those two could have traded roots, he said, calling the middling result a genuine shame. Lim confirmed the reading and added the rest. The brother had chosen Spirit Plant Peak, and the sister had followed, and by the rules her aptitude alone made her an inner sect disciple. Fortunately, the vacant immortal cave went to the pair of them, and while walking them up to it, Lim had discovered the boy was sitting on a secret. Baek Ji-shin asked whether they had found another Peak Master Lim. Perhaps, Lim said, since the boy stood at Chi refining layer 1 while his body refining had reached layer 3, with no guidance at all. That got the sect master's attention, and his face went serious. No technique at all, and still body refining layer 3 meant monstrous talent for the body or a special physique, and either one meant a treasure picked up off the road. Lim admitted he had only reached over with his spiritual sense now and then afterward. He also mentioned, without shame, that he had never told the siblings about the support plan reserved for high-grade spiritual roots. He wanted to see whether the boy could break the situation open. Baek Ji-shin laughed and called him a mischief maker. A high-grade spiritual root genius normally gets everything handed to her. The carefree sect would have carried Somi all the way to Foundation establishment and waived her quotas, since quotas exist to press the ones whose aptitude does not carry them. Baek Ji-shin pointed out that the pair had only 4 or 5 years of grace, and that meeting targets while cultivating was no small thing. Lim told him not to worry, and that he would step in if it truly went wrong. Both knew that without a trade, a person has nothing to do but feed his labor into somebody larger. Then Lim laid out the rest, and he clearly enjoyed himself doing it. Inside a single month, the boy had the chi-gathering co-medicine field running in perfect order, and yesterday's harvest came in fully productive. Better still, the clever thing had already begun using the sex field for private purposes, and today he had put his body refining on open display. Baek Ji-shin said the boy had stopped pretending, then remarked that the old ancestor's dream was gradually coming true. In this immortal realm, past or present, the jungle makes the law and strength does the talking. Cultivators chasing strength stop at nothing, and some refined, talented people into pills and swallowed them, hoping to take the talent with the meal. The founding old ancestor of the carefree sect had lived through something like that. Once his strength rose, he answered the call of the Nine Yang sect and raised a branch sect in this region. The whole intent behind the word carefree was that a disciple should never fear his own talent drawing a knife. They preached it for generations, and the prejudice in people's hearts sat there like a mountain. Then Lim Ji-sung appeared and gave the sect the best slogan it had ever owned, reaching Foundation establishment and proving it with his own body. The two of them made each other, and the influence spread a very long way. I committed the technique legacy to memory and went home. My sister was waving before I was through the gate, announcing that Brother Han had come, and there he sat under the ginkgo tree, drinking tea with all the urgency of a cloud. He asked whether I had got everything done, and I apologized for the wait. Han Gongson is my neighbor, and he was my only real friend through that first year in the sect. When we first moved in, there were visitors constantly, almost every one of them there for Somi. In their eyes, an outer sect disciple like me was roughly a servant with a family resemblance. Somi would not attend anything with a crowd in it, and though I explained that plainly, the rest read it as a polite lie. Some stormed off while others said they understood, and quietly drifted as we grew more reclusive. My neighbor was simply always there, and both of us kept to ourselves. So we became friends. He is past 20 now and has spent 10 years in the sect. His understanding of the spirit plant path runs deep, and he reached contribution point freedom so long ago that he no longer counts. These days he is wrestling with alchemy, and if he makes anything of it, he could join Pill Peak overnight. I asked about that once, and he said he still preferred farming, that a man reaps what he sows, and that he studied alchemy only to use his own harvests better. I agreed down to my bones, and that answer is why we became friends. Out of everyone I deal with, Brother Han is the one who actually looks like a cultivator to me. He farms every day, drinks his tea, walks the sect, reads, studies his alchemy, and carves little toys, which we discuss far too often. He loves food to an unreasonable degree and cannot cook at all, so ever since he first tasted mine, he turns up with liquor and shamelessly eats at my table. His brewing is superb, and some of what he makes carries real effects, including one that drives cold out of the body. It is a pity the carefree sect never carried the spiritual brew legacy, or he would have been a spiritual brewer years ago. Somi grew comfortable with him too, which for her is a statement. He is about 10 years older than us, gentle and settled, and he takes care of us without ever announcing it. A great deal of what I know about the sect came out of his mouth, including Peak Master Lim's history and a long list of unspoken rules. Over the tea, he mentioned that Ocho Pung had come to make trouble for me again. I said the man was an unshakable lapdog, though the little dog he kept had turned out surprisingly spirited, and Brother Han said the lackey had rolled back to the outer sect. Then he asked whether I could clear my mission target and offered to lend me the rest. I told him I had a way and thanked him anyway. He said to call him if anything got difficult and lifted the wine pot at me. I asked what he wanted to eat, which by then was our unspoken contract. He proposed pickled fish, and when I asked whether it was pickled fish again, he said it only gets more addictive the more you eat. The anticipation on his face was the most expressive thing I have ever seen him do. I came back with a basin of pickled fish the size of a washtub. The three of us drank and ate our way through the evening on the weak fruit wine my sister and I love, his standing gift. At the table, I raised the blood spirit rice, partly for advice and partly because I wanted to hand him a portion to brew into spiritual wine. I had given up on the health-nourishing porridge formula because I could not keep up with it. What mattered now was eating high-grade blood spirit rice so none of its strength went to waste. He said that if such rice existed, he would study it down to the grain. Then he asked whether I planned to hand the blood spirit rice in for contributions. I said the thought had crossed my mind and asked whether something was wrong with it. He suggested I give it to the Peak Master first and let him negotiate for me. We belong to Spirit Plant Peak, and a good thing found under our roof should pass in front of our own Peak Master first, especially with the peaks quietly competing. My stomach dropped. After all this time in this world, I had forgotten the survival rules of an office. I thanked him and said I would go and see the Peak Master. We talked a while longer and then he took his leave. I handed the formation jade slip to Somi, walked the fields, laid down the spirit nurturing art, and went back to cultivate. With no blood spirit rice on hand, my body refining was on hold, which freed 6 hours a day. My learning skill had climbed a major achievement, and 1 year in this place produced what 3 years in the mortal world would have. I opened artifact refining and alchemy first, since I suspected both were tied to skills I already carried. An hour later, I had my answer, and it was 1 yes and 1 not yet. These legacies are mostly technique and knowledge, with a blueprint or a pill formula attached. Artifact refining gave me a headache. The forging I picked up almost instantly, since mortal world knowledge carried me through. But even the simplest low-grade magic treasure requires inscription. Memorizing inscriptions is nothing to me, while engraving them mid-forge, steering spiritual energy through every stroke and managing the heat besides, is another matter. With no fire spiritual root, I would spend months over ground fire just to learn the flame. My mana is nowhere near enough to carry a forging through either. Without spiritual sense, a smith cannot read the inside of his own furnace and has to guess. There are very few artifact refiners at the chi refining stage, and the ones who exist got there by decades of accumulated feel. Alchemy was a different story, because although it also demands heat control, at its heart it is the combining of medicinal properties. If the properties are the point, the same materials ought to make a potion, and even weaker than the pill, some effect is still effect. I turned to the Talisman Legacy, which needs almost nothing beyond paper, a brush, and decent materials. The mystery of the craft lives in the runes. While a talisman master draws, the paper pulls in heaven and earth spiritual energy, and the instant the shape closes, it locks that energy inside. Simple to describe and brutal to execute, because the mana output has to run unbroken from first stroke to last, in one pass. Different runes take different paths, and some carry nodes where the output must swell or thin at exactly the right moment. What it does not demand is a big cultivation base, which surprised me. The output has a fixed ceiling since low-grade materials can only carry so much mana before they tear. Even a foundation establishment cultivator, drawing a first-order talisman cannot open much of a gap against a chi refining one. True masters, of course, change rules rather than adapt to them, and a real talisman master relies on such absurd control that a talisman forms at the flick of a finger. What caught my attention was that these runes look startlingly like the inscriptions of artifact refining. My guess is they are the same thing, split apart long ago and evolved to suit different materials. Better still, the pill formula riding along with the alchemy legacy happened to be the chi-gathering pill. The materials were already in my warehouse, which meant I could test whether a chi-gathering elixir instead. Potion sounds like something a man sells out of a cart. Artifact refining could wait, but talisman would train my control over spiritual energy, which is what every other path is waiting on. So I cultivated alchemy and talisman together. A week went by in a blur, both legacies absorbed, and then came the first day of alchemy. I brought 3 spare portions of herbs out of the warehouse, since one portion is reckoned to yield 10 pills and an elixir ought to yield more. I added the herbs in order, ground them down and filtered off the juice, and before long I had a dark murky liquid that looked scraped out of a drain. Appraisal called it a chi-gathering elixir, a simply mixed liquid that had destroyed the balance of its own medicinal properties, and noted that it contained toxins. Naturally, I drank it anyway, with a 50-point antidote sitting at my elbow. I swallowed the elixir, took the antidote after it, and circulated my technique to see what remained. The medicinal power was still in there. So fire control in alchemy is not only what forms the pill, it also burns out the impurities and toxicity. And since the antidote cleared this toxin, the spirit medicine inside it must neutralize the poison directly, which pointed me at the sovereign, minister, assistant, and guide principal from the medical hall. My crude method had left the original assistant too weak to suppress the side effects, so I set the problem aside until I could buy spirit medicine. Then I went back into the talisman legacy in my head. The first order low-grade talismans are all auxiliary work, which suits me fine. A cleansing talisman means never needing a bath again, and apparently works miracles on foul things too. A cleaning talisman lifts stains and washes clothes. A breeze talisman produces a gentle breeze. Purpose unclear, though I suspect the immortals invented the hairdryer without noticing. I found a brush and paper and started on the drawing method, since rushing before the runes come out right only burns material I paid for. A month slipped past while I was not looking. I came back from morning exercise to find Somi doing something in the kitchen. She jumped, told me I had scared her, and said she was installing a formation. I watched her work a carving knife across a surface with enormous concentration, and the marks were a formation pattern. After a while, she wiped her face, pressed a prepared spirit stone into a hollow, announced it was done, and told me to try it. I asked what exactly it did, and she told me to watch closely. She made a hand seal. A small cloud condensed above the basin, and rain came down out of it. Small spirit rain formation, she declared, complete. Now she could put the dishes straight under it, and when I cooked I would not have to keep shouting for her. My sister had invented plumbing. I told her that her formation talent was excellent, considering it had been only a month. She said she was nowhere near it, having figured out one spirit rain formation and only the clumsy way of doing it. A real formation master refines formation bases and releases them finished, far faster than carving by hand, and this one had taken her a full hour. Her words were modest and her face was smug enough to light a room. I told her my Somi was the best, and she immediately began planning a great cloud rain formation over the spirit field, once we had money for materials, so I could water everything myself. I asked how nice it must be, arranging things so I would end up doing all the work alone. She froze, then loudly declared her loyalty and swore she would make formations and support the family. I told her it had not come to that yet, and pulled out a handful of spirit talismans, running through the cleaning, the cleansing, and the breeze. She lit up, said she had wanted these forever, and slapped the first 2 onto herself before I could finish. Spiritual energy wrapped around her and she came out spotless, and she said it felt like a bath and fresh clothes in the space of a blink. Then she asked how much contribution they had cost, and I told her I had made them myself. That got me a genuine shriek. She demanded to know when I had learned, and I said I had bought the legacy a month back and it happened to work out. She went from astonished to sulking in one clean step. I always tease her, she complained, and I had clearly become a spirit talisman master while standing there praising her little formation. I told her spirit talismans are simpler than formations, and that once she has formations in hand, she will pick them up on sight. Good thing I did not mention that I had also refined an elixir. 2 months later, a patch of red gold rice swayed in the spiritual field, and the appraisal read high-grade blood spirit rice at full ripeness. 3 months from sowing to harvest, when I had confidently told my sister 6, which is a pleasant way to be wrong. Brother Han plucked one stalk and turned it in his fingers, and every grain was half the size of a little finger. A push of mana shattered the husk and left the rice inside, blood red and clear as cut crystal, giving off a faint smell of blood. I asked whether he had thought about how to brew it, and whether that smell would ruin the wine. He said brewing it would be no trouble, since plenty of wine steep monster beasts, where the blood is often the most important part. So I told him I would get the harvest in and let him taste the rice once it was threshed. Then I pulled out a sickle, and the poor man visibly short-circuited and asked whether I was not going to release a spell. I admitted my spiritual root talent was bad enough that the golden sickle spell was beyond me. He said that explained it, offered to handle the harvest himself, and added that he was looking forward to his encounter with the blood spirit rice. Every time this man meets a new food, he calls it an encounter, as though the rice had written him a letter. He walked me off the plot, put 2 fingers together, and swept them through the air. A golden crescent of spiritual energy flew out. The blood spirit rice went down in swaths, and a few passes later the acre was cut. Then he waved for an item manipulation spell, and the fallen rice lifted in orderly ranks and threshed and husked itself in midair. The stalks peeled aside while the grain streamed into the waiting bag, and not one seed hit the dirt. I asked whether it could be done like that. Still steering the airborne harvest, he asked, honestly puzzled, whether it was not supposed to be, since most outer sect disciples must master it or never find time to cultivate. Then he remembered I had never been one. The whole harvest took less than a quarter of an hour, and in the mortal world that work eats 10 days to half a month. I watched him erase 3 days of my planned labor with one gesture, and I could feel my eyes shining. The mortal world here is far more backward than the one I came from, but the cultivation world overtakes my old life's technology in more places than I care to admit. When the grain was in, he spread the stalks across the plot and burned the lot to ash with a fire control spell. I thanked him, then asked what the item manipulation spell cost. He had rarely seen me that eager, so he did not draw it out. He told me it was a basic spell that every outer sect disciple receives, and I demanded to know why nobody had given me one. Laughing, he explained that most outer sect disciples begin with spiritual rice while I had gone straight into spirit medicine. That landed. Spirit medicine is precious, and unlike rice, its yield does not sit outside the plant where a spell can shake it loose. Some varieties grow deep, where item manipulation would snap off the very roots that hold their strength. He told me to exchange for it myself, since it costs all of 10 contribution points. 10 points. I had been budgeting 3 days of my life against 10 points. I said it was hardly a crisis, and dragged him inside to taste the high-grade blood spirit rice, which even I had never eaten. I went with the simplest method first, plain steamed, and soon 3 bowls stood there with a smell of blood rolling across the room. My dead memories chose that moment to leap out of their graves and attack me, so I decided to observe for a while. Somi, blissfully unaware, picked up her bowl and took an enormous bite. Her first taste as a child had come inside a nourishing porridge, so she suspected nothing. One mouthful and her delicate brows drew together, and to her credit she forced the swallow down before setting the bowl aside. Then she caught me snickering and shot me a look of pure betrayal. After that we both stared at Brother Han, who was still radiating anticipation. He lifted his bowl, sniffed, and pronounced it a clean breath of blood essence with a unique flavor, truly captivating. My sister and I looked at each other with nothing left to say. He took a mouthful and chewed slowly, swallowed after what felt like a full minute, and held the same posture with his eyes closed while we watched. When he opened his eyes, he called it a unique encounter, just like his first meeting with Little Flower when he was 6. I asked who Little Flower was, and he said a blue-patterned snake, named to commemorate their first encounter. Knowing this man as I do, Little Flower almost certainly finished that encounter inside his stomach. He asked why the two of us were not eating, since he thought it was pretty good. I said I was eating right now, made myself taste it, and sat there stunned, because it was enormously better than I remembered. The smell of blood was fainter, and I suspect my cooking skill was quietly stacking the deck. Tolerable, I decided. I put my whole bowl away in one go, and then polished off my sister's as well, which she permitted with the expression of a woman watching a crime she had ordered. That left 300 pounds of blood spirit rice in the storeroom, and 2 gluttons in front of it. I suggested a blood-drawing grass to strip the smell out, and he countered that a snake stew rice would be better, and I asked where we were supposed to obtain a snake. He said he would buy one from Spirit Beast Peak. I asked him to bring back Monster Beast meat too, and offered to pay him blood spirit rice, but he waved that off and said the meat could count as his meal fee. A full day of trial, error, and small kitchen fires later, I finally settled on a plan. By evening, the fire array was lit, and every ingredient laid out, and the 2 outside kept craning toward the kitchen, since the smell was rich enough to reorganize a man's priorities. I carried it out under a lid, announced it as high-grade blood spirit rice, experimental dish number 1, and lifted the cover. A wave of heat and pepper hit them both, and Somi started coughing violently and kept sniffing at it anyway. Brother Han declared it a hot and spicy encounter, shoveled in a mouthful, and came up for air calling it delicious, tasty, passionate, and perfect. My sister had gone past speech entirely, gulping water and gasping with her face flushed scarlet, and still reaching for more. Blazing spicy blood spirit fried rice presented in full. The trick was to bury the blood under heat and pepper, then push further so the bloodiness itself became a seasoning nobody could copy. Good food really does make guests happy and cooks satisfied, and I felt the click before I read it, my cooking skill rolling into major achievement with its deliciousness bonus doubling to 60. I went up to the top of Spirit Plant Peak to pay my respects to the Peak Master and put the blood spirit rice in front of him. By every rule I knew, a Peak Master is a project manager for my old life, and every drama I watched promised me layers of gatekeepers. Instead, I walked straight up, unimpeded, and when I lost the way, a passing disciple pointed me along. It felt exactly like asking directions in a village, and I wondered whether the carefree sect was really this relaxed. Then I stood at the entrance of Peak Master Lim Ji-sung's immortal cave, with my hand raised to knock, and the door opened by itself. A beautiful woman came out, smiled at my frozen face, and said I must be Kang Ron and that Peak Master Lim was expecting me. I had not opened my mouth once, and she already had my name. Inside, close to 100 acres of spirit fields carried spirit medicines and rice and fruit trees, small in quantity but staggering in variety. Apart from the farmland, there was only a small pavilion against the mountainside, nothing like the luxury I had imagined. For a moment it felt like walking back into a mortal village, and then the spiritual energy hit me and woke me up. I said out loud that the energy here was dense, and she told me that was natural, with a second-order spirit gathering formation running. Out in the field, a burly middle-aged man was working with his shirt off, bronze-skinned and stacked with muscle, a thoroughly handsome uncle. She called out for him to put his clothes on because someone had come to visit their master, and her face went pink while she said it, and she never once stopped looking. Anyone with eyes could read that scene, and I had been dragged through more romance dramas than I care to count. He apologized, waved a hand, and his robes flew over and dressed him before he came across to greet me. He stood a good 6'3" and his build was intimidating, but the plain honest smile canceled all of it out. He introduced himself as Seo Jobu, told me I could call him Old Seo or Old Boo, and pulled 2 freshly picked fruits out of his robes. They were clear as glass and shaped a bit like the dates of my old life, except snow white. I had expected the Peak Master's senior disciple to be an unapproachable genius, and instead I had met a farmer. The woman beside us explained they were first-order ice spirit fruit, sweet and cooling, with some genuine benefit to cultivation. She may have feared I would not recognize the value, or wanted her senior brother's generosity appreciated. I thanked senior brother Seo for handing a first-order spirit fruit to a stranger on sight. He had offered me Old Boo, but we were not familiar, so I kept to the forms. Inside the carefree sect, most people address one another by surname plus senior brother or junior brother, and only within a lineage do they use the ordered forms. He waved the thanks off, said he had grown them himself, then called me far too polite and walked back into his fields. She led me on, clearly satisfied with how I had handled myself, and her tone warmed several degrees. I asked her name, and she said her surname was Lim and her given name Bakegun, surname Lim. This had to be the Peak Master's daughter. She brought me to the 3rd story of the pavilion, then said I should visit often, since her senior brother clearly liked me. I took a long breath and knocked, and the door swung open on its own onto the balcony. A small square table held a steaming teapot and 2 little cups. An old man sat on a futon looking at the mountains and sipping tea, and the scene was so peaceful I wanted to be him someday. He told me to sit and drink some tea first, since there was no rush. The teapot floated up on its own and poured while he spoke, finishing exactly as I finished sitting down, which is the sort of casual timing that tells you what a foundation establishment cultivator is. I lifted the cup, and the aroma went straight to my head, while insights I had not asked for came surfacing. I took a slow sip, bitter first, then sweet, with an aftertaste that did not end, and my technique began circulating without my instruction. The evergreen art jumped 4 full points off one mouthful of tea. I drank the rest of the cup down, and though it did not hit as hard, it still moved the bar. Having tasted the benefit, I looked at the teapot. Obviously, I could not drink from the spout, so instead I looked at Lim Ji-sung as pitifully as a 12-year-old can manage, and said nothing at all. Even he was briefly stunned, and then he laughed and asked whether his clear heart tea was not bad. I nodded while my eyes slid back to the pot. He gave up and pushed the whole teapot across the table, saying that unless I finished it, I would not be in any mood to talk with an old man. I drank cup after cup until the pot was empty, and by the end, the evergreen art had climbed a full 10 points on tea alone. I will not pass on a chance to improve myself just because taking it makes me look greedy. It was also a test, because how a man reacts to a guest emptying his teapot tells you a great deal. He watched until my enlightenment had run its course, then refilled the pot with ordinary tea, which I found deeply disappointing. Then he asked whether we could talk now, or whether he should be the one asking. He suggested I must have some special ability, and that judging by how carefully I had hidden it, the ability was not a simple one. I asked whether the Peak Master had known all along, and then what he made of my intentions in coming. I was prepared for this, but I wanted to see just how divine a foundation establishment cultivator really is. He read that off my face and told me, laughing, that they are not so amazing, that he knew only a portion, and that my intentions were speculation. Then he listed my hidden physical body cultivation and my private use of the sex spiritual field, and said my special ability ought to raise the output of spirit medicine, quite similar to his own. As for what I wanted, he guessed I hoped to trade it for resources, since a low-grade spiritual route makes everything too hard. I nodded and asked when he had discovered it, and he said from the very beginning. That took me a second. He explained that nothing in the cultivation world is truly strange, and that the ways to see through a man are as numerous as stars. From the moment we met, my physical body cultivation had lain open in front of him. A foundation establishment cultivator's spiritual sense makes everything inside its range clear and precise, and I could only hope it stopped where I thought it did. I told him this disciple had come to offer some spiritual rice to the sect, discovered back in my hometown, and took out the low-grade blood spirit rice. He picked the grains up, examined them, then put some in his mouth and tasted them. He said he understood now, and asked whether this was the spiritual item behind my body refining. Then he glanced up, remarked that compared to what I grew myself, it seemed quite a bit worse, and asked whether I was still keeping secrets. I answered frankly, saying this disciple can nurture certain spiritual seeds and raise their quality, and laid the medium grade and the high grade beside the first. I did not overstate it, since breeding only works on mutated seeds, and mutation itself fires about 5% of the time. He studied all 3 grades carefully, and called it a very good ability. Then he observed that the blood spirit rice in Owa village had clearly been influenced by me as well, so the carefree sect had investigated my home, exactly as I assumed. I asked how my parents were doing, and he told me both were in excellent health, since the carefree sect is a righteous school and would never do such a thing. They should not do anything that foolish, and if they ever did, I could only swallow it and wait for a better day. He asked what I wanted, and I told him I would follow the sect's arrangements. He laughed and said I should hear his proposal first and object afterward, then laid it out while drinking his tea. There would be a large sum of contribution up front, and a share of the profits later. The sect would not monopolize the rice, and it would push my name until I was known as the father of blood spirit rice. Inside the sect, I would receive special assignments and, more importantly, access to special resource channels. The assignments would obviously be tied to breeding, and the channels I asked about in detail. They hold strategic materials that never reach an ordinary disciple, including breakthrough pills, foundation establishment spiritual items, and rare legacies. Getting anything out costs contribution points plus special contribution tokens, and my 3 grades of seed were valued at 3 first-order tokens. There is also an assessment every 3 years, and contributions of extremely high value earn additional rewards. Since blood spirit rice grows without any spiritual vein underneath it, I expect those assessments to go very well. I told him I was generally satisfied and asked him not to bother pushing my name, since I dislike being the center of attention. Fame carries weight here, but I would rather make my fortune quietly. Then I asked whether this disciple could settle permanently in that immortal cave, because I wanted to bring my family up the mountain. Wherever I end up, in whichever life, I want a house that belongs to me. He agreed without a moment's thought, and I am fairly sure that if I had not asked, he would have arranged it anyway. With the serious business finished, I looked at those endless spirit fields outside the window with open envy. He asked whether I wanted more spiritual fields added to my immortal cave, and I asked whether that was allowed. Spiritual fields are not mortal farmland a man opens up whenever he feels ambitious. A new branch of the spiritual vein has to be drawn out beneath the ground, and a spirit-locking formation laid over the top so the energy does not drift away. After that, the land is irrigated with spiritual springs and spiritual rain, and nursed for years while everyone waits for the soil to change. Only when it is fully turned to spiritual soil does anyone call it a success. It sounds straightforward and the cost is enormous. He told me my special physique was worth the sect's investment, and that he would fight for the approval himself. I bowed properly, then remembered a question. Since the sect had already found my home, why wait for this disciple at all, when they could simply have taken the seeds? He shook his head, smiling. That low-grade blood spirit rice, he said, was nowhere near worth losing the chance to recruit someone with a special physique. Very few people knew of the matter at all, only the sect master and himself, and after discussing it they decided to wait for me. I asked what would have happened if I never came forward. He said they would not have made things difficult, but I would have had to find my own resources, and asked whether I truly believed I could reach Foundation establishment alone. Honestly, yes. But why grind alone when a sponsor is standing right there holding the resources out? In this world, weakness is the original sin, and I understood that while I was still a mortal child in a village. Every relative I have is immortal, so on the road of cultivation there is nobody to carry me. Getting strong quickly means finding an organization and proving I am worth its investment. Breeding makes an excellent cover for that, because any progress that looks unreasonable can be blamed on my special physique or the sect's resources. Better yet, with the carefree sect spreading my name, my skills might improve faster than they have been. They have been slowing badly on their own, and the more I collect, the more sit neglected, since fishing and forging go untouched for months. So I would bring the family up the mountain, settle into the carefree sect, and farm in peace. A sect with a Foundation establishment great perfection cultivator at its head is a rare safe harbor, and having disclosed what I could do, my hands were finally free. Then he interrupted my calculating and asked whether I knew what the name Carefree actually meant. Seeing my interest, he told me the origin of the school, and by the end I understood that Carefree had been built to give people with special physiques a place to stand. I came away admiring the carefree ancestor more than I expected. Then I blurted out a question I had not meant to ask, whether it could really be done, since the strongest powers of the East Sea are in a sense sole true monarchs. He said he did not know, but that the carefree sect was walking that road regardless, and that as long as he and the carefree ancestor stood here, nothing about it would change. And then he said they hoped I could become the third. I looked up and met his eyes, and he was completely serious. He was that certain I would reach Foundation establishment. I told him this disciple only wants to quietly farm now and later. He said that was good, that I was very much like he had been at my age, and that in time I would come to appreciate the carefree and the carefree sect. I did not come back out until evening, and that conversation stayed with me the whole way down. I had walked up there thinking it was an ordinary transaction, and somehow I had fallen into the carefree sect's trap and come out designated as the third of something. Still, this is probably the single best place for a man like me. I carry more secrets than one boy should. And without Lim Ji-sung at the top of it, I would never have opened my mouth. And whatever else they are, they hand over genuinely good things. The haul went far past anything I had expected. Contribution first, and after every deduction I received, 20,000 contribution points in one payment, with a profit share to follow. The sharing waits until the sect finishes its experiments and draws up a plan for planting, harvesting, and selling. Contribution on that scale counts toward the mission quota, so neither of us need touch a sect mission for a long while. Second, the Waterwood Immortal Cave now belongs to the Kang family outright, so I can bring my parents up to live on immortal spiritual land that will quietly lengthen their lives. On top of that, the Chi Gathering Spirit Medicine assignment is no longer compulsory, so I can plant whatever I like. Once this batch finishes, I intend to switch to spirit rice and other spirit medicine of my own choosing. There was also the awkward matter of 500 extra contributions the accounting could not swallow, so I brought it up, and the Peak Master glared and then handed them over. Because I had revealed breeding, regulation counts my special physique as aptitude, so I became an inner sect disciple on the spot. Inner sect disciples receive 100 spirit stones a month plus a bottle of chi gathering pills, while outer sect disciples get 10. My sister and I had both been drawing our allotments across these 15 months. The chi gathering pills were low grade and suited Somi, so every last one went into her stomach, and our spirit stones had piled up to 1650. The other benefit is access to the special resource channels, where a person can eventually exchange for Foundation establishment pills. In plain terms, I had been moved into the Sex Core talent cultivation plan. Even Somi did not receive that treatment, though I suspect it is only because she has not been here long. I also explained the prerequisites of breeding honestly. Lim Ji-sung learned that I unconsciously mutate spirit plants while tending them, and that only a mutated plant will accept breeding. He handed me the token to his own immortal cave along with my first special assignment, tending those 100 acres and watching for changes in the spirit medicine. My only complaint was that he had not invited me to stay for a meal, though I comforted myself that a Foundation establishment cultivator might not eat at all. Cultivating immortality until you no longer eat strips a great deal of joy out of the arrangement. I was grumbling to myself, but Brother Han was walking past, and most cultivators have irritatingly sharp ears. He agreed loudly that good food is one of life's great joys and must never be wasted, and raised the wine pot in the usual signal. He proposed the spicy blood spirit fried rice, and mentioned he had the first pot of wine brewed out of blood spirit rice, so the two together would make a wonderful reunion. With an hour left before dinner, I decided to celebrate properly, and conscripted both of them into the kitchen. She pointed out, with feeling, that there was a small spirit rain formation right there, so why was I still calling for her? She was steering the water flow anyway, so the complaint was mostly theatrical. The change surprised me, because she used to be first through the door whenever I asked. She went quiet and then said she only wanted more time to cultivate so she could help her brother earn money. I told her the Immortal Cave was our own home now, and nobody could take it, and that quotas would not trouble us for years. The words big meal went into her like a spell, and she worked harder than either of us. Brother Han, chopping vegetables, remarked that my meeting with the Peak Master had apparently gone smoothly. I made a noise of agreement over the wok and said I would tell them everything at the table. Then, mid-stir, I called for the blood rice and asked for the little me, which is not a grain of anything that is my sister. I caught the slip and asked again, properly, for the blood spirit rice. She handed it over with a face like thunder and demanded to know how her brother could call her by the wrong name. I said it was a slip of the tongue and hardly my fault when both of them were me. She informed me, in a small fierce voice, that I was the me. That put both men in the kitchen on the floor laughing. After that, the place turned into a riot of spatulas and flying ingredients, and the hour went past without any of us noticing. The last dish was a chopped chili fish head, and the three of us looked at a table crowded end to end and wore the same accomplished grin. Somi announced that the three of us were amazing to have produced a spread like that in a single hour. I agreed out loud several times while privately noting that I had done about 80% of the work. Brother Han said this encounter, arranged by his own hands, was truly exciting, which I translated as cooking makes him very happy. He was already seated, waiting for permission like a well-trained dog, so I told him we were a family and picked up my chopsticks. Somi went for the sweet and sour pork ribs first, and complained immediately that they were far too sweet. I told her to take that up with her brother Han, since I had said 2 spoonfuls and he had nearly poured the entire jar in. He considered this, and said that compared to a first love that was sweet and sour, a passionate love sweet all the way through was not bad either. Under 3 sets of chopsticks, the whole table disappeared with alarming speed. Then he filled the cups with the blood spirit wine. There was none of the blood smell I expected, only a faint clean scent, and even Somi asked whether it was really brewed from blood spirit rice. He smiled and gestured for everyone to taste it. I took a slow sip. A spicy kick hit the back of my throat, and when it faded, it left something startlingly refreshing behind, a bit like the fizzy soda of my old life without the sugar. Then heat began spreading through my whole body. I got up without deciding to, walked into the courtyard and started running the Mystic Turtle Force, and it held less than 5 minutes before it faded. I called for another round. A wine pot came flying out the door and I caught it and took a long pull straight from it. Then I went back to cultivating and steam started coming off my skin as I moved. Somi, watching from the doorway, was genuinely frightened, since from where she stood, her brother had taken 1 sip and began punching the air like a poisoned man. She said with enormous relief that it was a good thing she had not drunk any. Brother Han reassured her that my body refining aptitude is the only reason. She took the shallowest possible taste, stuck her tongue out, and declared she preferred fruit wine. Half an hour later, the wine was gone, and so was the session. Body refining layer 4 moved 1%, which sounds like nothing until you remember 3 months had earned me 12. That half hour was worth roughly a week of ordinary grinding, and the Mystic Turtle Force came up to minor achievement at the halfway mark and handed over its branch, the Mystic Turtle Protection. I asked Brother Han whether he could brew more and said spirit stones were not a problem, and he told me to keep them and gave me the recipe instead. Having a friend like that really is one of the great joys of a life. I looked around at all of it, the immortal cave I had arranged with my own hands, the spirit fields standing lush and full, my lively sensible sister, and the gentleman next door. After 2 lives and a great deal of stubbornness, I, Kang Ran, had finally found a foothold in this world. The morning light was still thin when I came back from exercise and found Somi humming over the dishes. I asked whether she got bored sitting at home all day and offered to take her out for a walk. Her singing stopped and she said there was no need, that she preferred cultivating in the immortal cave and studied formations whenever she had spare time. I told her that was good, and that her heart nature would benefit her cultivation. Everyone has their own destiny, but heart nature matters enormously. Being resolute and pressing forward without fearing hardship is one road, and the highest good being like water is another entirely. Brother Han next door is the living proof of the second road. He holds only a medium-grade spiritual root, and yet his cultivation runs far faster than other medium-grade roots manage. A few days ago, he broke into Chi refining layer 5 and invited us over to celebrate. Layer 5 at 22 is impressive, and at that pace he should reach Chi refining great perfection before 40, which is roughly what a high-grade root would deliver. Then she said quietly that a lot of people say her heart nature is not suited to cultivation. I asked who had said that, and then, hearing my own question, asked how she could possibly know. I watched the word exposed cross her whole face before her voice went small, and she admitted she had gone out walking once and heard it outside. I asked why she had not told me, and pointed out that she cannot even walk properly when a stranger looks at her. What would have happened if somebody had taken her? My tone came out heavier than I meant. She said it was the day I went to find the Peak Master, because she saw I had not come back for most of it. I had nothing to say to that for a while. When I finally spoke, it came out as a scoff, and I told her that whoever they were knew nothing, and that she is shy and has never once been a coward. I have lived with this girl for years, and if her own brother does not know what she is made of, nobody does. She was gentle outside and iron underneath, never caused a single person trouble, and never complained. So I told her heart nature can be changed anyway, that she is only 11 and has me and Brother Han and everyone else. Then I got up to work the fields, and on my way out told her to cultivate well so that one day they would all have to call her senior. In the immortal realm, outside close blood within 3 generations and the bond with one's master, the capable come first and strength sets your place in line. Out on the paths I had meant to walk the spiritual fields, but I had no heart for it and finished the round in a hurry. Over the past several days I had been exchanging for every spell and legacy I thought worth owning, and it had eaten close to 10,000 contribution points. The assignment tending Lim Jizung's 100 acres had already begun, though I took the day off. My quotas were gone and I had planned to take Somi out somewhere to play, and then this happened instead. So I went walking, and the past came up at me the whole way. The question I could not put down was whether I had simply not been paying enough attention to her. Since the day Somi came into our house, she has never once done anything alone. She went out with the rest of us, everyone looked after her. And after the Kang family got frozen out, we all played inside our own courtyard. That walk was almost certainly her first time going anywhere by herself, and she did it because of me. Knowing her as I do, the picture assembled itself without my permission. My sister creeping along the path toward the Peak Master's immortal cave, getting lost a while, then opening her mouth to ask directions as a conversation reached her. So I started working on how to make her smile again. Living alone in a house that size can be lonely, even with a brother in the next room. I decided to buy her a spirit beast for company, since an immortal cave that large could use something lively in it, and with a pocket full of contribution points I could afford. 1. So I turned towards Spirit Beast Peak. Back in the kitchen after her brother had gone, Heo Somi finally spoke, and her voice came out shaking. She said she would work hard, and she said it to the wall. Her teeth were clenched and her lips trembled in a way she could not stop, and the tears came without asking her permission. And underneath all of it, her heart felt warm. She had told herself she would not care what anyone said, but the strength that rose in her chest at the judgment of the person closest to her told her otherwise. Then her vision blurred, and the memories came. A pale-faced woman lay on a bed and told her gently that she was a girl and would marry one day. The old virtues, obedience first and modesty after, were what she ought to be learning. Somi nodded to everything, because she only wanted her mother to get better. The scene shifted. Villagers stood in clusters and whispered about her. And she had forgotten the words, keeping only a few stamped into her. Difficult birth, severe illness, and all of it her fault. That feeling made her want to crawl out of her own skin. And afterward, every time a crowd's eyes landed on her, it came back and she would shake and want nothing but to run. The scene changed again, and a much younger Kang Ran stood there full of noise and life. He told her he did not have enough strength on his own, so she would have to help him, and then she would get a share of the credit. At the spiritual root testing, Father Kang asked whether she was all right and whether he should come up onto the platform with her. She said there was no need and that she was not afraid anymore, while inside her head she wanted to catch up to Brother Rand's footsteps. Then the memory froze on one image, a sturdy figure planted in front of her, blocking every other gaze, her small hand swallowed inside a larger one, and a boy's voice explaining that his sister was simply more introverted.